Yes.
The Leaf Spring Army sends its regards.
Hello, everyone. I'm the Enforcer, and I'm accompanied by Enforcer Matt.
And good evening, folks. It's Enforcer Matt, and welcome back to day 1491 of the War News Stream. And tonight we have very big news out of Europe and also out of the Middle East. We are seeing tonight that U.S. fighter jets have unleashed massive strikes on Iranian sites today, and these are larger than usual, to say the least. We've also seen that Iran's begun deploying to Kharg Island to try to get ahead of an upcoming U.S. invasion, and also Russian drones exploded on NATO territory today, hitting 2 different Baltic countries. And we have very big news, and it's good to see you all once again.
And of course, we're going to be covering the past 24 hours of news from around the world, as we have been able to hear significant developments inside the Middle East, East Asia, Eastern Europe, and also the United States of America over the course of the day. First and foremost, the Islamic Republic of Iran has been hit massively by U.S. forces over the course of the day, with significant damage being caused throughout the larger part of the country. This came after the Islamic Republic of Iran flatly refused to even talk on the 15 points that were given to Pakistan as an intermediary to present to Iran as the United States talking points for possible negotiations for a ceasefire and eventual peace treaty to end the conflict that is ongoing. Not only did Iran refuse the attempted peace offer, but they also stated that the Islamic Republic of Pakistan was completely uncouth in showing it to them, and then stated that the United States is completely illogical and that they are not willing to engage in negotiations at this moment. Not long after, the Iranians then conducted attacks against U.S. forces inside of Iraq and also conducted a strike against the USS Abraham Lincoln carrier strike group within the area of the Arabian Sea. We've also been able to hear that Iran is now coordinating with the Yemeni Houthis in the area of western Yemen to be able to try and close the Strait of Bab El Mendab, which is this strait in the southern area of the Red Sea that accounts for around 12 to 14% of all international shipping traffic annually. And not only that, is a vital corridor for intermodal shipping traffic traffic traveling between East Asia and Europe, and not only that, the United States of America as well. We've now also gotten further developments that the United States military is conducting almost a side war, in its sense, with a popular mobilization front militia group within the area of western Iraq. We have seen that the Iraqi government has given orders for them to be able to fire upon any U.S. and Israeli forces that are conducting attacks within the area of the Republic of Iraq, but it also appears that some of these forces have already been conducting those actions unilaterally without any orders, and the United States Air Force is attempting to target and destroy these forces within western Iraq as much as they possibly can. Israel is still preparing for an eventual invasion of southern Lebanon, and also came under significant missile attack by the Islamic Republic of Iran once again today, with significant damage being seen within some areas of the country, including hits that appeared to get incredibly close to a major power production facility just north of Tel Aviv. Moving us on out of the region, we've also been able to hear that further north and towards the area of the Leningrad Oblast, there have been, suffice to say, absolutely major developments that have happened today, not only between the NATO forces, but also between Ukraine and the Russian Federation. Over the course of the past 24 hours, the Russian Federation has violated Latvian and Estonian airspace, with Russian drones flying well into their countries. Not only did this incident occur, but we also were able to report that it appears that one of these drones hit directly onto the smokestack of a major power plant of Estonia's near to the area of the Narva River, right across the border from the Russian Federation. This is the first such recorded instance in history where the Russian Federation's drones that have flown errantly across the border in the NATO territory have caused physical damage to a critical structure of any sort so far. Just across the border, the Ukrainians have really been showing the Russians who daddy is, and it appears that they have been able to blow away the port of Primorsk, Ust Luga, and also the icebreaker shipbuilders in Vyborg. The damage has been quite significant to not only Primorsk, but also the area of Ust Luga, and it does appear that both ports have been completely shut down at this moment, with nearly 40% of all Russian oil traffic being completely knocked out within those two attacks alone. The Ukrainians have also announced they conducted the attacks with an A-22 Foxbat drone, a light sport aircraft that has a bomb equipped onto it that they then run into a building like a kamikaze fighter. What's interesting, though, is that we never saw any of those in any of the footage that we saw from yesterday, which is leading us to suspicion that the Ukrainians might not be entirely honest about the weapon system that they used to be able to strike Ust Luga and also Primorsk. We did see a couple of them, that has been confirmed, but we're not sure if those are the ones who caused the irreparable damage at Primorsk and Ust Luga. The icebreaker shipbuilders were also hit in Vyborg as well, which appears to be an attempt to further reduce the Russians' Arctic ship-going capacity and also ensure that shipping lanes of the Russian Federation may not remain open or as operational within the Gulf of Finland and also within the Arctic Circle regions like the port of Murmansk. We've also been able to get additional news and information out of Ukraine that the Ukrainian armed forces have been able to inflict significantly high losses onto the Russian Federation today and have been able to largely push them back in some areas once again today. The Russian Federation has also claimed that a joint exercise between the United States and South Korea, which is soon to happen, is apparently a preparation for war, which is a little bit weird because that military exercise has been going on for about 40 years straight annually. We've also been able to hear that the Philippines are redrawing legal relations with the People's Republic of China. We don't know what this means, but we believe that it's largely, one, about the energy crisis in the Middle East, and two, about their sovereignty concerns over their islands in the South China Sea, which the Chinese continue to try and lay claim to. And we've also been able to hear some other further developments out of the United States of America's government as well. But we are going to be making sure to cover all of this, including all of the pieces of news that we haven't gotten to yet in our opening summary throughout the course of the stream, starting with our largest stories first, and then moving our way on down into the smaller stories throughout the night. But wait a minute, what's that? Do I hear breaking news from the White House? Matthew, what do we got?
Okay, so we have some breaking news right now that is very, very weird. I'm not sure what to make of this, but the White House is currently making tweets, apparently, it looks like, or posts, and they're very odd and they're very vague. Not really sure what this is about. It appears to be a video that maybe Caroline Leavitt has filmed and then posted to the White House social media page, and we're also seeing a follow-up picture of a distorted American flag, also in a frame as well. So, not really sure what this is about. To be honest, it's very odd, but Enforcer, you can actually show that video, by the way. It's from the White House, so we can actually show that, and we can let the people make up their mind with what this actually is.
It's launching soon, right?
All right, so
She said something about it's launching soon. I don't know what that means, though. It's very odd.
I do have to say, folks, that those shoes right there are exceptionally pointed. Now, I don't know a lot about women's shoes, but I feel like if you kick someone with one of those, that would be counted as assault with a deadly weapon. But moving on from that, we have also been able to see this clip from the White House as well, which appears to be some sort of a solid black film that then shows like the frame of an American flag and then the sound of a notification. That wasn't y'all's phones, by the way. That was apparently this video right here. But a little bit interesting with that, and we don't know what any of that really means at the moment, so we're trying to get some further developments and information on that right now, but these posts have just come out from the White House moments ago.
They're sort of teasing the Iran war, kind of like you tease like a new like crypto coin release or something. It's kind of a strange type of messaging coming out here. It seems like it's intentional. Like I see some people saying maybe they got hacked. I don't think so, because they actually put sound on in the caption of that video we just watched a minute ago. It looks like it's a intentional video being posted. So a bit of a strange thing to do. Also, if it's meant to send some type of message, it seems like it'd be better just to be professional about it. But you know, it is what it is. That's what we're seeing right now at the White House.
I couldn't even tell you what those mean, and so we'll just work with that with what we have right now. Those just came out, and I suppose that's that. So with that in mind, it is time for us to get on into things that we can talk about and we do know about, which are the major developments that have happened over the course of the day, especially around the entirety of the world. And of course, we will be starting with the largest stories first, and then moving our way on down into the smaller stories throughout the night. Moving us on directly into the Middle East, we have been able to hear that the 15-point ceasefire plan has about died as quickly as it was made. Yesterday, we were able to get news that the United States of America had made up a 15-point ceasefire plan that was then presented to Pakistan with the request from the United States that the Pakistanis then relay that 15-point ceasefire plan to the Iranians and see if the Iranians would sign off on it and approve it, not, outright, but at least seemed interested enough to go to the negotiating table and talk about future developments as far as possibly trying to end the war. News then came out today that a big reason why this was even attempted is that apparently the Republic of Turkey, the Republic of Egypt, and the Islamic Republic of Pakistan have been pushing for a meeting between the two in 48 hours, although that is apparently not going to be happening. The Iranian government has flat out stated that they will not be accepting the 15-point peace plan, and that was according to an Iranian official who spoke to Al Mayadeen, which is showing that they have, one, immediately shot down the 15-point peace plan almost as soon as it was presented to them. We generally knew that that was going to happen. For many people who were saying that we were just being critical and negative yesterday, it was going to obviously happen. The Islamic Republic of Iran is now fighting a war of attrition at this point and is hoping to economically bleed us faster than we're able to militarily bleed them. And so right now it's more so of a game of waiting, and right now they're thinking that they have some odds and possibly being able to try and win that game before we win it against them. And for that reason, they're not going to be willing to negotiate at the moment until we make it clear that they have no leverage over us and they're largely on the losing end, which means that we would have to reopen the Strait of Hormuz and see that normal civilian traffic continues through that area in one way or another due to our direct actions, and then, and only then, will the Iranians feel like they're at such a disadvantage they will even consider talks, and who knows if they'll actually seriously talk at that point even then. We've also been able to hear that right afterwards, they then stated that the U.S. talks are illogical, and then started conducting massive attacks against U.S. forces throughout the entirety of the region. And that generally is our best indicator at the moment that the Islamic Republic of Iran is not willing to talk, because right after they rejected the ceasefire proposal and then stated that the United States was illogical, they then started strikes throughout the entirety of the region. Starting with our largest attempted strike, at least at the moment, we did hear that the USS Abraham Lincoln and its carrier strike group did come under attack once again today. Apparently, U.S. officials have not confirmed if the USS Abraham Lincoln came under attack, but the fact that the Iranian officials are once again trying to lay the claim that they did conduct an attack against this carrier strike group is at least showing, whether it happened or not, that they are still in a hostile position against the United States of America, and they're not willing to de-escalate. They're still attempting to escalate the conflict and cause significant damage to U.S. forces that are currently within the region and operating against them. We've also seen that strikes were reported within the area of Erbil, and there has been some preliminary reports that it appears that the U.S. base at the Erbil International Airport may have been targeted and hit by several more one-way drones that were fired by the Islamic Republic of Iran, at least recently. That base is staffed by U.S. personnel, meaning that there is a high possibility that some U.S. soldiers may be in great danger or jeopardy by these attacks that were conducted by the Islamic Republic of Iran just hours ago. Even further still, the Iranians are actually attempting to pull the wild card out and try and use it against us, and this would be largely a double whammy, to be entirely honest with y'all, if they try and conduct this one. According to some word that's come out today, the Islamic Republic of Iran is actually communicating with one of their proxy groups or terrorist forces in the region, the Yemeni Houthis, and are attempting to see if they will close the Bab El Mendab. Now, this is a pretty interesting name, the Bab El Mendab, and we've generally not called it that before here on the channel, but considering that I'm one for technicality, and I have actually, unfortunately folks, not really done enough digging to know the exact name of the strait and get it down to memory, I did have to make sure to get it down to memory today because this is going to become a fairly important thing, especially if the Houthis end up helping out Iran and doing them what the Iranians would call a solid. The Bab El Mendab is this little narrow strait right here that passes into the Red Sea and to the Gulf of Aden that allows for ships to make their way in and out of the Suez Canal. This is basically, if you want to look at it, the very end of the Suez Canal in reality. Because yes, the Suez Canal is built entirely within the area that connects the Sinai Peninsula with the mainland of Egypt, but in reality, the Red Sea is largely the natural corridor of the Suez Canal, and its true ending is at the end of the Bab El Mendab, or generally that's its entrance as well. This means that if the Houthis close this area right here, the Suez Canal is effectively unusable at that point, and that is a pretty major concern. Nearly 14% of all international shipping passes through the Suez Canal, and that also means that if the Bab El Mendab is closed, that then means that we will not be able to see any sort of significant passage, most importantly, of intermodal cargo shipping through this area. And this is something important that I need to explain here really quickly, because there's actually a major difference between the Strait of Hormuz and the Bab El Mendab. The Strait of Hormuz is incredibly important for oil traffic, meaning that oil ships need the Strait of Hormuz. But the Bab El Mendab doesn't really play that much of an importance, at least at this point, for a lot of the very large crude carriers, or the VLCCs, that go through the Strait of Hormuz, or the Strait of Hormuz. Sorry, folks, I'm getting them confused here with the wordage. But the Bab El Mendab is more so used by major intermodal carriers, and let me go show you all that here really quickly. At least the difference between the two, and tell you all a little bit of how they work as far as the infrastructure. So let me go pull up a very large crude carrier ship, and then let me go get you all an intermodal. So this is a very large crude carrier. That's the actual technical designation for one of these, and that is a VLCC. That's what it's short for. These are the ships that generally go into the Strait of Hormuz, and they go to countries like Kuwait, Iraq, Bahrain, Qatar, and elsewhere, including Saudi Arabia. And they load up with millions of barrels of oil per ship, and then they send that out to some country somewhere in the world that has purchased that oil. On the other hand, this is an intermodal ship, and let me see if I can get you all a decent picture of one of these. This is probably a decent one right here. This ought to get the picture across. This is an intermodal ship. Very different in terms of the economic consequence that this has if the Bab El Mendab is closed. Intermodal ships carry general cargo. It's not bulk aggregates, and it's not oil. A lot of the normal consumer goods that y'all use, like clothing, say personal effects, any sorts of items, anything that y'all buy, it comes over on an intermodal ship inside of a container, and then that container is then moved to its final destination, unloaded, and then put in the store for all of y'all to buy. As far as the Bab El Mendab is concerned, that is really a choke point for that kind of traffic, not the oil tankers. Most oil tankers are actually fairly large, actually generally so large sometimes that most of them actually make the trip around Africa instead of going through the Strait of Hormuz, from what I've been able to find. And so the larger percentage of the shipping traffic that goes through the Bab El Mendab is actually intermodal shipping, not really a lot of the oil tankers. So for that reason, if the Yemeni Houthis close off this strait, not only are we seeing a near complete closure of the oil coming out of the Middle East, we're now seeing that the voyages for intermodal ships carrying the containers that have y'all's consumer goods on them that y'all buy are now going to start becoming about 3 times longer and 4 times more expensive, meaning that the shipping rates for those end good products that y'all would purchase at the store without any further assembly required would start to skyrocket in price by a decent margin. Shipping and handling isn't the entire end cost of a product, but we would see that the prices might rise by about 20 to 30% at an average, and may even go a little bit higher than that. So the Iranians are actually trying to not only see that our peace plan at the moment, or at least peace attempt by the US government, doesn't succeed, at least in the single form that it is existing in right now, they are also trying to choke the United States and the Western world by trying to also close the other linchpin of the region, which is the Bab El Mendab. And this has led a lot of people to wonder, how in the world is this going to be going on into the future? The fact that the Iranians aren't willing to talk to us right now, and they're also trying to get the Houthis in to basically close the Strait of Hormuz 2.0 and a whole other different form of shipping, is somewhat concerning. And it does seem that a lot of people are believing that this war is either going to be lasting for a good bit longer or way longer than we're seeing right now. And Matthew, what are people thinking about this, and what are you thinking about it as well?
Okay, and also real quick, just to let y'all know, I was trying to do some research into those videos that the White House had posted. It looks like they posted them to the Instagram page as well, which suggests it's not some type of accident or some type of hack. It appears to be likely intentionally shared by the administration. So it appears to be some new form of messaging, perhaps more quantum messaging, perhaps. We'll have to find out later. But getting to the poll, though, it says Iran has refused all talks with U.S. officials despite U.S. claims of progress. And how does this end? 38% said the war will end in a few months, while 35% said the war will last years, probably a very prolonged war, and 18% said the war will end in mere weeks and it'll end pretty quickly. So this one here, I would say I generally agree probably with the 38%. It'll probably last at least several more months. I don't see this thing ending in weeks. Number one, there's no signs of a negotiated settlement. The Iranians are still saying they want the U.S. to come closer to their shores, so that way the Iranians can try to hit our U.S. vessels. That's not a good sign. Also, they're threatening to close the Red Sea Strait, which the enforcer just talked about. That's also another escalation. And not only that, but they're also deploying forces to Kharg Island to get ready for an invasion of the island. So there is zero signs of de-escalation by Iran's side whatsoever, and they are still saying they're going to keep the strait closed and keep trying to hurt the U.S. economy. So I don't see this thing ending in weeks. Like the whole narrative that this is going to end quick and everybody's just spreading fake news because they're trying to cause fear is absolute bogus. It's not going to end that quick. So I'm with the 38%. But Enforcer, what say you?
I'd have to say that I'm with the 38%. It might end in a few months, but to be entirely honest with y'all folks, right now there really is no way to even see an end in sight to this right now. And that could change depending on how the war is fought from here. But to be entirely honest with y'all, we're kind of caught in a crossroads like the Russians are with the Ukraine. This is a matter of vital national security that we see that the Islamic regime is overthrown, or that in the worst case scenario, they're at least reduced enough significantly to see that they will not be able to continue forward with their nuclear programs and ICBM missile programs. Although, really, that's unrealistic to just say that we've reduced them to not making that possible. If the Islamic regime exists, those programs will be possible, and they'll divert whatever efforts and materials they need to be able to keep those programs running. So the reality of it is that right now, we need to see the Islamic regime collapses. They don't look to be collapsing right now, at least at the moment. And not only that, they're not willing to even negotiate an end to the conflict, which means that we're pretty much stuck with two options. And there are two decent options that, well, not decent, but highly likely options that could be taken here, but one of them leads to an absolutely disastrous sort of result. One, we completely walk away from the war. That is a terrible idea. I can't even tell y'all how bad of an idea that would really be in practice. If we walk away from this war, not only has Iran effectively won the war at that point, because they were able to largely thwart all of our war goals when we started this conflict against them, but not only that, we are showing the entirety of the world that Iran was actually able to largely strategically defeat the United States and make the pressure significant enough that we just packed up and walked off. At that point, people are going to be stomping on us everywhere they can. The Chinese will, the Russians will, anybody will, because they'll be generally believing and expecting that the United States might be conventionally, militarily so weak that they really can't pose any sort of a threat globally. The other option is that we continue the war, and this will tie up a significant amount of resources and personnel within the region that might be required or needed to be able to go to war with China in the future if they attempt an amphibious landing on Taiwan, or will be necessary or required for us to see that we are able to fight an eventual Russian invasion of Europe if that happens. So both options are not that great, but the reality of it is, folks, is that the option of just packing up and walking away would be a lot worse. At that point, we're basically inviting all of the hypothetical scenarios that I'm explaining in the second option of continuing the fight to actually happen, even if we try and leave to be able to prepare for those eventualities. So I'd have to be entirely honest with y'all, folks. I think our best option would be to keep fighting the conflict, at least for the moment right now, and to try and force an opening of the Strait of Hormuz. We can't allow the Iranians to hold that thing forever. If we do, we're showing the Iranians that they have a huge play against us whenever they want. Even if there wasn't a war in the future, they could just close the Strait of Hormuz and conduct a blockade, and they would have a decent understanding based off of what's happened now that we wouldn't be able to reopen the strait, and nobody else is going to try and reopen the strait, which gives them a literal trump card on us anytime they want, to where if they become unhappy with us, they can just threaten to completely cut everyone off of the oil supplies that they need.
Yeah, I think at this point, I think it's pretty clear that the U.S. is simply trying to buy time until they can move the ground assets into place, because we know that on Friday, the first Marine Expeditionary Unit of the 31st will be arriving in the Middle East. That'll be the first ground forces arriving in the area. Then we're also going to see a second MEU showing up very soon after that, and we're also seeing an element of the 82nd Airborne also deploying as well. So the ground assets are deployed. That's clear at this point. We know that confirmed. And the videos that are coming out of the White House Instagram page and also the social media pages, to me, that seems like some sort of like, I guess, 21st century way of trying to intimidate and basically pull a psyop on the Iranians, because the Iranians are going to watch those videos and they're going to be as bewildered as the U.S. public is about what is happening with the post. But they're going to be a little bit more bewildered because, of course, that sort of suggests that something's about to happen on the ground, at least in my opinion. So I think the U.S. is buying time. We could see something pop off this weekend, or we could see it pop off maybe the next weekend possibly. But I think at this point, it's fair to say a ground invasion of some sort is definitely imminent, I would say.
Yeah, I would have to say, it definitely does appear that a ground invasion is going to be imminent. We do understand that the USS Tripoli's Amphibious Ready Group will be arriving here incredibly soon, and it's highly likely that the brigade combat team of the 82nd Airborne Division that was supposed to be moved over is probably already arriving within the area right now, meaning that militarily, at least with the available forces that we'll have, a ground operation could begin as early as this weekend, or it may take about the next weekend or the weekend after that to see that it actually comes into fruition. But in realistic terms, it could happen as early as this weekend. But I once again want to say, folks, very clearly that that's not an exact science, and it could happen at some weekend in the future. It does appear quite obvious, though, folks. The reason why we're saying weekends is that the President of the United States doesn't want to do this in the middle of the week, because he is believing that it's going to cause a pretty significant upheaval in the stock market. And so it appears that even by our current deadline that we're going to start striking their power plants, that we extended that to Friday night, which means that that would be after the markets close inside of the United States and generally around the world, and then we start hitting them. So that's why we're saying that it'll highly likely happen on a weekend.
And it definitely would. It would affect the oil price badly because, specifically, if they're invading, like, for example, Kharg Island, which is responsible for 90% of Iran's oil exports, that's definitely going to have a huge impact on the crude oil prices. So over the weekend, that gives people a 2-day period, about 48 hours, to kind of get used to the situation instead of panic trading and panic selling. So presumably, by the time that the futures open up on Sunday evening or Sunday night, presumably the people won't be as panicked then, and it won't be as bad. But, it could be, Kharg Island starts going sideways, and then by the time Monday rolls around, people are panicking anyway. You never can tell these days, but I'm not sure what they're planning to do. Like, I saw several people in the chat saying, well, guys, what are you talking about? Like, what are they going to invade if the U.S. forces actually carry this out? And we don't know. It could be Kharg Island. That's option number one. It could be maybe one of these smaller islands near the Hormuz Strait. That could be something as well. Or it could be they're planning on invading, for example, maybe near Bandar Abbas, perhaps. It could be that as well. We don't know what exactly it's going to be, but I think at this point, though, with the deployments we've seen so far of the U.S. military, that there's going to be some type of boots on the ground somewhere somewhere. We just don't know where it's at. But when it happens, though, I think it's going to be a bit of a shitstorm wherever it happens because the Iranians are waiting. They're deploying people, and they're also fortifying their coast right now to get ready for this invasion. So they're not going to be blindsided by it. They know something's coming, and the U.S. is apparently getting ready to pull it off.
And also, I just saw someone say something, and this is something I think people aren't really thinking about here. Because, folks, you always have to think dynamically when we talk about a situation like this, because the U.S. isn't the only active and moving government in the world. Any other government in the world can move however they want in reaction to what we're doing. I've seen some people in the chat say, oh, this is all terrible, we ought to just pack up and leave. Well, I hate to tell y'all, folks, but that might not end too well. Let me give y'all a hypothetical scenario here. What if we do leave? And what if the Iranians decide they're just going to keep the blockade going in Hormuz to punish us after that? Well, there's not really anything we can do then. Like, we've moved all of our forces out of the region. There's no air forces to try and open up the strait at that point. The Navy isn't there. So then we have to send everybody back to go to the Middle East to then basically start the war over again to just try and open up the strait. And so that's where we end up seeing that would become an unmitigated disaster, because a lot of people also always love the idea that people can just pack up and walk away from something. But this isn't like, a relationship with like a one-night stand that folks are having here. This is the world. And just because we pack up and leave doesn't mean that the Middle East just ceases to function and exist and that it doesn't pose us an issue. The Iranians could try and punish us and all of our allies and just keep the strait closed and allow for the price to continue to skyrocket on oil and see that they screw us over without them having to even fire a single shot at that point or even conduct a war. They would still be able to do that. And so you can't just pack up and leave. Like, that's just not a reality that would be feasible. That would end up even worse in reality. But a lot of people are currently talking about, right now, the Iranians trying to work with the Houthis to not only close the Strait of Hormuz, which is still currently closed at the moment. It's been closed for nearly a month. They're also trying to see if the Houthis will work on closing what we call the Red Sea Strait, or its technical name, the Bab El Mendab. And Matthew, what are people thinking about that first, and what are you thinking about that as well?
Okay, so generally so far, the Houthis, which is an Iranian proxy group down in Yemen. Everybody knows who the Houthis are at this point. They've made quite a name for themselves, an infamous name to say the least. They have not joined the war so far. So Iran has probably told them to hold off for now, because that creates leverage for Iran. So that's the wild card right now. The Houthis could shut down the Red Sea Strait, or whatever the technical name is for it. It's too complicated. I just call it the Red Sea Strait, because the other one's too hard to remember. But they could close down the Red Sea Strait. It's very possible that they could. And obviously, Hormuz is already closed as we speak. So the question is, do you think that Iran will reopen Hormuz? That's the question. And 68% said no, Iran is not going to reopen Hormuz. The U.S. will have to invade first. While 17% said yes, they will reopen Hormuz. And 9% said 50-50 on this one. And I can almost promise you that Iran is definitely not going to reopen Hormuz until an invasion takes place, or there's pressure put on Iran from China to reopen the strait. Because right now, Iran is getting to do a bit of a victory lap. They are having the U.S. Basically held over the barrel at this point with the strait. And that has been a strategic failure on the part of the United States, as we have not kept it open and we're not able to reopen it easily whatsoever. So it's obviously causing a major problem with the oil markets. It's causing a major problem with financial markets, literally globally. It's causing a huge problem. And Iran knows that. And it pleases Iran very, very much so to know that they're causing that much terror on the entire world, because it's a terrorist state. And that's literally what that government exists to do. So they're not going to let that go. There will have to be some force that comes into play to actually get them to reopen that. It's not going to be voluntary. But Enforcer, what say you?
They are certainly never voluntarily relinquishing control over the Strait of Hormuz and the ongoing blockade. I can tell you all that with absolute certainty, because let me put it like this, folks. So say that the United States is me and Matthew is the Islamic Republic of Iran, for argument's sake, and we both have pistols, and we both have them pressed right up on each other's heads. That's basically that's basically what this war is at right now. It's a figure of speech, Matthew. It's not anything literal. But that's what this war is at right now. Now, if Matthew as Iran was to take his pistol away, what position are they in then? Well, they're completely screwed as far as a war would be concerned, or in this figurative sense, they would be screwed. They're not going to do that. That would be an absolutely goofy and horrendous idea for them strategically, because this is the only way that they're able to get any sort of leverage on us at all. So they're not going to do anything except maintain the blockade and hope that they can starve us out economically before we're able to beat them militarily. It's a lot like the war in Ukraine, to be entirely honest with you all at this point. The Ukrainians are striking the Russians economically and hoping that they economically fold before the Russians are able to militarily even try and beat Ukraine, although they're really not even able to do that at this point either. So it seems to me, folks, to be entirely frank with y'all, I don't think that they're ever going to release the control of the Strait of Hormuz. Even if the conflict was to end, I think that they'd still try and conduct a blockade to punish us further for the economic damage that they've already been able to instill. And then it will also be shown at that point that the U.S. has no way or no willpower to physically clear out the Strait of Hormuz and reopen commercial traffic through that area. So I hope that does address that well, at least in my opinion, because I don't think, folks, at any point in time the Iranians are going to freely relinquish that. We're going to have to physically invade that or bombard it to the point that they're not able to threaten shipping, and then the traffic will begin to flow freely. But any other notion would be a notion of fantasy at this point. But moving on from that, it is time for us to get on down into the Strait of Hormuz, because, Matthew, we did hear of a positive note today. Matthew, it was wildly positive, and once again it's showing that we're just flat out liars. Over the course of the whole day, 3 ships were able to make it through the toll booth. Apparently, they all 3 paid about $2 million apiece, and they did go through the Iranian designated shipping lane that goes through their territorial waters to make it out of the Strait of Hormuz. But from what we know, they were mostly all Iranian-aligned vessels, or they were going to China, so we're believing that the Chinese may have paid the toll, or the Iranians may have waived the toll and allowed those ships to get through so that way they could get to China.
Yeah, it seems like a really odd thing to do. $2 million to get through. It seems, in the scheme of things, $2 million to get through the strait, it's actually not a bad deal, like in the scheme of things. But at the same time, though, it's literally funding the terror regime inside of Iran. So it's awful for the West. But when it comes to these companies or whoever's trying to get through the strait, I mean, $2 million in the scheme of a major shipment, that's not too bad in the scheme of things. But at the same time, though, they didn't have to pay that previously. So I'm sure they're not happy about it. Also, apparently, it's 2 million won, apparently. It's not in US dollars, apparently. It's apparently in the Chinese currency, from what I've heard.
Is that right, huh? Is that right? And also we can see here that there doesn't really appear to be a single vessel. There's one, but it appears to be going to Jebel Ali, which is the port right down here. So it doesn't really appear that there's any transits going through the Strait of Hormuz at this moment right now while we're live on air. And I think this once again ought to be reiterating to everyone that the Strait of Hormuz blockade is still on. Crazily enough, folks, while that is happening, the price of crude and Brent has actually been dropping. It's almost like there's some sort of interference going on to this because it doesn't make any sense at all. I want to show you all this for you really quickly. The price of normal Brent, WTI crude is $91. It dropped literally like a stone from $99 almost straight down to $90 in basically a single hour when the market opened today. Well, actually, I believe this was a couple of days ago, as a matter of fact. And Brent crude did about the same thing. And let me show you all that here really quickly as well. It also plummeted to the floor, and it's making us wonder, what in the world is going on with that? Because let me tell you something here really quickly, folks. I did take an economics class or two when I was in college about basic economics. And one of the most basic things that you learn about in economics, even in high school, for example, is this thing called supply and demand, where the price of a given good is relative to the amount of demand and the amount of supply for that product. And if the supply reaches the demand, then the price will be fairly average. If the supply far exceeds the demand, the price will generally be fairly low because they're just trying to get rid of the inventory. And if the supply is a lot smaller than the demand, then the price would be going up. And while the supply is a lot smaller now for oil globally than it is, and the demand is still the same, oddly enough, the price is dropping from where it was getting towards its highs, where it was about to start skyrocketing up towards about 150. And this is leading a lot of people to wonder what's going on with that, because this is not working off of any basic concept or understanding of economics. The supply is decreasing, and the supply has decreased for nearly a month. Yet for some reason, the price is starting to fall. And some people are starting to cry that there is possibly some market manipulation going on here that is leading to the prices becoming artificially low compared to what they really should be if it was directly correlated to the supply of oil. But we wouldn't be able to say that for certain here on the channel. But it is certainly something mysterious that I think requires some further study and some further some further looking at, I would say. But moving on from that, we have also been able to hear, while that's been going on, that the United States did blow up the munitions facility at the Bandar Abbas airport. Let me show you all this here really quickly. Here is the airfield of Bandar Abbas, and here is the munitions dumps right over here. Y'all are actually about to see these get vaporized on film by GBU-72s of the United States Armed Forces, or the United States Air Force. Y'all want to see it? Matthew, do you want to see it?
Yeah, let's see it.
Well, here they go. Oh,
damn.
Looks like a lot of secondary explosions right there. Well, I'd have to say that generally is giving us an idea that at least the forces at Bandar Abbas will be working with a little less munitions here in the future. Hopefully they won't be sorely missing those. But right now we do understand that there is still a decent amount of operational anti-ship batteries on the coast, including autonomous drone boats, autonomous flying drones, and anti-ship missile batteries as well that generally dot the coastline of the Strait of Hormuz, which is making any attempted passage still impossible if we're not considering the minefield that's been laid, and we don't know how many mines there are out there, but that also makes passage through the area generally impossible, at least at the moment. So that's the current situation at the Strait of Hormuz right now as we are on air. Moving us on out of the Strait of Hormuz, though, and deeper on into the Islamic Republic of Iran, we have been able to see that today, near to the area of Bushehr, it does appear that there were additional strikes being conducted by the United States on the Iranian ports within this area. Let's take a little look at this. I wonder what in the world we're going to be seeing here. I wonder. What do y'all think?
Oh, چقدر پایین اومدین. بخوابی.
Let's see here. Supposed to be an FA-18 Super Hornet. You see it flying right over. We hear the sound of its gun conducting a strafing run. And we can actually see right there, it appears to have been hit by a man-pad. Right there. That is something that's a little bit interesting because, you know, folks, the Iranians cut the clip right after that little plume of smoke right there, and they actually claimed that they had shot down the F-18. But from what we can tell, seems to me that it was still generally operational. I think it may have been some sort of a grazing hit because it didn't seem to be causing any significant damage to the FA-18 Super Hornet. One thing, though, that I see a lot of people talking about is why in the hell is this F-18 so low? This is actually a little bit interesting, folks, and I gotta say that this is quite wild as well when we talk about it. The U.S. seems to be operating off the concept that we have some sort of air supremacy in the region and that there are largely no air defenses to speak of. Because of this, we've actually seen that a large amount of the Navy's Super Hornets are conducting gun runs on ground targets below on the Iranian coastline, which means that they're using the 20mm M61 Vulcan gun on the aircraft to be able to fire at targets below. That means they have to get down at an incredibly low level, and not only that, they have to get within the range of the gun, and they also have to get within visual sight of the target using their heads-up display, which generally means they have to get quite close and quite low. However, we've seen in multiple instances that these FA-18 Super Hornets are actually coming under ground fire, including this man-pad, and I'm going to be entirely honest with y'all that if they do not change the tactics that the Navy's aviators are using, it is going to be coming around at some point that we're going to hear about one of these actually getting shot down over Iran and the pilot having to eject over Iranian soil. And they might end up getting killed, wounded, or captured as a result of that action, which would lead me to say that the Navy needs to really be changing a lot of its tactics at the moment, because this is leading to aircraft like the Super Hornet getting into perilous situations where if that man-pad had hit a little bit more forward than it did in this clip right here, where I'll show y'all once again, if it had hit a little bit more forward in the central area of that fuselage, that F-18 would have been inoperable and those pilots would have had to have ejected from that aircraft. But moving on out of that little bit of a clip right there, we also had a second one from the area showing this as well. We see the man-pad. We can see it once again kind of conduct that little blip, and then we're going to play the rest of the clip afterwards. You see the people on this ship are actually pretty excited about the F-18 getting hit.
Did they fire flares or something at some point?
Not that we could see. And also, sadly, those sorts of manpads don't really give off an RWR warning to the aircraft to let them know that there's an incoming missile. So the F-18 probably didn't know about it until they heard a thump near the back of the plane. And then they looked probably in the rear view mirrors on the cockpit canopy and saw that there was probably a little plume behind them, which showed that a missile basically blew up almost on them or kind of on them a little bit.
Yeah, I'm just glad the pilots are okay because that could have turned out much worse. Like you said, if it hit in a different spot, that would have turned out really ugly.
Yeah, I would definitely agree with that. We can also see that the F-18 was above them for just a second. There we can see it. We see it flying off into the distance. And it seems to have been generally unfazed by the hit. This gives us an idea that it was generally a grazing blow. Whatever sort of a hit the manpad was able to make, it was largely superficial, which is very lucky for that pilot and possibly the co-pilot that he had on board, which would be the weapons operator. But that is still too close of a call for comfort. And to be entirely frank with y'all, I think that might be indicating to us that if we continue to see such a cavalier attitude to close-in air operations, we're probably going to see that one of our aircraft eventually does get shot down and one of the crew is going to be captured from that aircraft. Moving us on out of that, though, we have also been able to hear that there has been a fairly interesting development that's come out of Russia today that actually pertains to the war. According to Western sources, believe it or not, everyone, the Russians are apparently providing drones to Iran. While the tables turned, remember when the Iranians were selling drones to Russia? Now Russia's sending them drones. It's like a self-help circle right here. You know, they all help each other out a little bit. But a lot of people are talking about whether or not the United States should do something about this, or whether the United States should react at all. And Matthew, what are people saying about this, and what are you saying about it as well?
Okay, so we've been hearing this for actually weeks now, that apparently Russia is sending all kinds of stuff to Iran. And obviously, we saw them send stuff before the war started. We saw Russia send attack helicopters to Iran, and we literally saw a video of those sitting on the runway at an air base inside of Iran. So apparently, they're actively sending attack drones as well. They're sending Shaheds right back to Iran that's being developed and manufactured inside of Russia under license. So why is the U.S. not reacting to this? And why is the U.S. acting like they don't see it, even though our own intelligence sources are saying that Russia is doing it? 41% said it's fair game. The U.S. does it in Ukraine, while 38% said the U.S. is scared to upset Russia, and 13% said Russia probably really isn't sending stuff. And at this point, I would say it's very clear the U.S. does not want to get at odds with Russia for whatever reason. Also, we're still seeing that Vladimir Putin's generally being given a lot of leniency for the most part, and Zelensky's still on the receiving end of, kind of getting shit on to a certain degree. So I would say it kind of is fair game at this point as well. I will acknowledge that as well. The U.S. sends weapons to Ukraine to attack Russia. It's a proxy war, and now Russia is using Iran as a proxy war against the United States. So it's kind of just the way warfare works now. It's basically the way superpowers, or alleged superpowers like Russia, try to fight wars against other countries. So mainly, though, the reason why the U.S. isn't reacting is they don't want to acknowledge it because they would have to take action against Russia, and that's something the U.S. has demonstrated they don't want to do under any circumstance. But unfortunately, what say you?
I would say that I would actually have to, I would generally have to say, folks, that it's not necessarily fair game, because I know a lot of people are probably like, but Enforcer, we do that with Ukraine. But how foreign policy works is that it's rules for thee, not for me. Like when the Russians provide weapons to Iran, they're terrorists supporting a terrorist state. But when we supply weapons to Ukraine, we take the position that we are a righteous nation providing weapons for the righteous defense of a self-sovereign people who are trying to defend their own nationality, national identity, culture, and people from an invading nation. And so that's generally the kind of premise that I take, to be entirely honest with y'all folks, because in foreign policy, we're not supposed to be fair. It's generally nice to be fair in, say, the Geneva Convention and the rules of engagement and such in the actual wars that we fight. But when it comes to foreign policy, we're generally trying to position our enemies at a disadvantage. And that means that whenever they do the same things we do, we sit there and call them bastards for it. That's just generally the approach. I would say that we should start to put significant pressure on the Russians about providing military support to Iran. And if they say that we do that with Ukraine, then we'll just say, well, that's unfortunate because y'all are invading a country illegally and we are trying to stop a country from nuclearizing, so there's a difference. But outside of that, though, in all honesty, folks, like, we're not talking in the foreign policy side of the perspective. It is fair game. I mean, this is how everyone does stuff these days. We provide weapons to Ukraine. They provide weapons to Iran. It's how it works. But generally, we want to put our enemies at as much of a disadvantage as we possibly can. And maybe by putting some pressure on the Russians, maybe the Russians would end up getting a little bit scared and they might back off of providing support to Iran, which will put us in a much better position because that limits the amount of available usable drones that Iran might have at any given point. So I would hope that that does address that the best I can, at least in my opinion. Because that's how it generally works. That's how the cookie crumbles, folks. Because remember this, folks. Remember this. I want to remind you all of this one. This is a good one. Back in the day, when we were helping out the South Koreans, we were helping out the South Koreans against an illegal invasion of North Korea. And when the North Koreans were getting invaded, we were technically liberating the people. It's always a one-sided sort of an affair. Because you don't ever try and be even with an enemy, especially when it comes to foreign policy and diplomacy. That would end up kind of getting you screwed a little bit. But when it comes to the actual fighting of a war, you try and be as fair as possible and follow the Geneva Convention and the rules of war as much as you can, because you don't want them to start conducting acts of barbarism unless if they do it first and then we can follow afterwards. But you want to try and keep it as civil as possible once a war actually starts. So with that, we are going to be moving on out of that news and getting further on into the Islamic Republic of Iran. As we were able to see within the area of Shiraz, there were a couple of strikes that happened within this city. Let's take a gander. I love how they put out the videos, folks, in Iran, and they're like, this happened in Shiraz, and then they blur out the ground, like, that hurts us from knowing where it is. Like, you know, don't you find that funny, Matthew? Don't you find that funny?
Yeah, it's goofy, really.
Yeah, it doesn't make any sense at all. But we hear the strikes in the distance here. Oh.
Sounds like the Russian, like a lot of car alarms going off the distance.
It does. We sadly can't see any smoke rising yet, but we did hear the sound of the explosions in the distance. Oh!
Oh! Yeah, there it goes.
دور زد الان باز میزنه چی رو زد؟ آگاهی رو زد فکر کنم Shinosh.
Shinosh. That's something we can get out of this.
Really can't see anything in this video. You just hear stuff happening in the distance, really.
Things are certainly happening. That I think we can be sure of. Dang. Moving on from that clip, we also got to see the smoke plumes in this picture right here, which does confirm that the strikes were happening. We also have a second amount of data, similar duplicate video, showing the strikes in Shiraz. Moving us on from that and further on north and into the area of Natanz, we also were able to hear that the Natanz uranium enrichment plant was getting hit again, and we could see the size of the explosions in the distance, clearly giving us an indication that the Natanz uranium enrichment plant is getting slammed. We don't know with what, and we don't know what kind of damage is actually being caused, but we'll hopefully be able to get some more information on that here soon. We've also seen that around the area of Mashhad, the city of Mashhad was getting hit directly by airstrikes over the course of the day as well. Oh, listen to that gush gun. How cute. Ooh.
This is Mashhad?
Yes, this is the city of Mashhad.
I think specifically that might have been the airport getting hit right there that we're seeing the explosions happen on.
It could have been. That airport is actually a somewhat significant one for the Iranian Air Force because they operate a decent number. And let me see if I can find them here. Let's see here. Where in the world are they? Oh, yes. a decent number of transport aircraft out of this airport, and it also houses a rotary aviation wing of attack helicopters, and also that crappy Shahed 285 thing that they made, the light attack helicopter. It's believed that it might be based here as well. You can also see the damage from the 12-day war back in the day, and the remaining tail section of an aircraft that once existed, but is turned to ash since the strikes about a year ago. But moving us on out of that, oh, wait a minute. Oh my goodness. Look, Matthew, it's F5 Tigers.
Oh, sure is.
Man, that is absolutely crazy right there. Crazy stuff, I tell you. But moving on from that, it is time for us to move on over to Tehran, as we were able to see that the city generally didn't have any strikes in it today, but once again, reiterating the Iranian government statements, they have stated that they will not be accepting the 15-point ceasefire plan by the United States, and they've also called us illogical, and then conducted the attacks that we saw down in the Persian Gulf over the course of the day, and also an attempted attack on the Lincoln. They also attempted to attack U.S. forces within Erbil, and we've also seen that they conducted attacks on the Kurdish HQ in the city of Sulaymaniyah in northern Iraq, which we could see in these clips right here. We see one of the strikes right there on the HQ, and we can also see another clip of it right here. Ooh. They love that tisk, tisk, tisk noise in the Middle East. Like, everybody does that for some reason. But moving on out of that clip, we've also been able to see that down in western Iran, there has been some very significant actions over the course of the day. It does appear that at the moment, the United States is now fighting almost a side conflict with an Iraqi militia that is directly created by the Iraqi government called the Popular Mobilization Front. This basically serves as an armed citizenry within the Republic of Iraq, to where they're able to call them forward in defense of the country if they needed to. Generally, because of their poorly trained and poorly commanded status, there is a decent hotbed of radicals and terrorists that actually operate under the name of the Popular Mobilization Front and are within its ranks, but generally operate well outside the command and authority of the Republic of Iraq's government. For this reason, the United States has been conducting strikes against these forces throughout the large part of the country since really the opening of the conflict, but it appears to have been since the Iraqi government, which has now ordered that the Popular Mobilization Front can actually fire back at U.S. and Israeli forces that are conducting attacks in Iraq, and especially against those of the Iraqi armed forces. We actually saw that they were trying to fire at a U.S. aircraft today, and I don't know. I don't know if it went well. I mean, you know, did it not? I mean, I don't know. Like, you know, let me see if I can find the specific clip. Oh, here we are. Here it is. Here's the clip of them firing a gush gun at one of our A-10 Warthogs. They actually filmed this and put this out, so I'm expecting that they did live, but I don't know for how much longer after they filmed this clip. I have to say, they seem very well trained and coordinated. I wonder what happened after.
Oh, is that that was their video buffering right there? I thought that was ours for a minute. Their stuff was literally buffering.
No, that was theirs. It's not always my computer, you know. But here's what was happening during that time that was kind of leading them to fire into the sky. Oh, is that an A-10? I'm pretty sure it is.
I thought the A-10 could only operate in areas where there's no air defense.
Pretty much it should not be, but I mean, then again, we shouldn't be conducting close-in operations over Iran knowing that they have operational man-pads, and yet we are, for some reason. Kind of a little risky. Because, you know, folks, it actually was true that in the Gulf War, an A-10 was actually strafed by one of those very gush guns and was taken down over Iraq in 1991. So, you know, I'd have to say, folks, the U.S. is playing it pretty hot and dangerous right now with a lot of our air forces, and we might see that some of them end up getting hit badly enough that they actually get taken down. But, you know, we'll have to wait and see eventually if that is the case. We also were able to see further videos of the A-10 in action, including this one as well, which was another clip from the ground inside of this province of western Iraq. There's the old boy. Look at him go. Everybody knows an A-10, for better or for worse. We also were able to see airstrikes that were happening in the Anbar region as well. And let me get y'all to that clip right here. Here was the aftermath of the strike that the A-10 conducted, by the way, on the Popular Mobilization Front forces in the Anbar province. We didn't get a specific city, and the Anbar province is pretty big. It's pretty much the entirety of western Iraq towards the Syrian and Jordanian borders. So we don't know exactly where this was within the Anbar province, but it was quite a significant strike to be sure, and it does appear that the Popular Mobilization Front forces in Iraq have taken some losses as a result. We also got some really cool footage today from US CENTCOM actually showing an F-35 Lightning refueling from a KC-135 aerial tanker somewhere over Saudi Arabia. Look at the high fidelity of this footage.
It almost looks like a 3D modeling of it, like in a rendering software or something like that. It looks fake.
Honestly, it almost does. It's really cool, though, I have to say. Like, I really like that footage. It's a neat look, too, you know, the F-35 taking a little drink in the middle of the war from a KC-135. How neat of a thing. But moving us on from that, it's now time for us to move on to some of our last news within the region, which comes out of Israel, and then we're going to be moving on to the major news up in Europe. But before we get to that, I do have to say that we are entirely honored and greatly appreciative that so many of y'all have been here with us so far tonight. We still have about 24.7 thousand people here at the moment. And at the peak of the stream, we had about 25.5 thousand people here. And I got to say that we're entirely honored and massively appreciative for each and every single one of y'all being here and considering this channel to be your primary source of news pretty much every single day of the week, every single year. And in honor of that, before we move on into all of these other pieces of news that we have for the night, large news at that, especially coming out of Europe today, I do want to make sure that we take a pause for a moment and answer 3 questions from the chat before we move on into the rest of it all. And so, Matthew, what do we got?
Also, by the way, for everybody asking, the White House has apparently deleted both of those posts that we saw earlier. The one that apparently showed some female voice speaking on camera saying they're launching soon or launching now or something to that effect, that one was deleted. And also the other video with the American flag in it and also some strange like notification noises in the background, that one was also deleted as well. So I can't really tell if this was something like a publicity stunt or something. I'm not sure why they'd want to do something like that, but that's certainly below the level of the White House to do stuff like that. But we can't tell. Like, it's possible that maybe it was unintentional, maybe, but 2 posts in a row on multiple platforms, that seems like it was intentional. So kind of interesting. But anyways, though, jumping into our super chats, our first one here is going to go to Arthur Cardy. And thank you very much, Arthur, for that massive $300 support, by the way. And we appreciate that very, very much. The largest support of the night and extremely generous. And we appreciate it very much. He said, why is everyone forgetting that Iran has drones with 2,000-kilometer range that can hit ships in the Strait of Hormuz from basically anywhere in Iran, and boots on the ground around the straits accomplishes nothing to protect the ships?
And I thank you so much for that unbelievably massive support, Arthur Cardy. That is humongous. I actually didn't see that come in. That was like legitimately a live reaction from me. I was like, damn, I was like, $300, holy moly. And a huge thanks to you for the support, by the way. I would have to say, though, I haven't heard any news about them having a 2,000-kilometer range drone. I think you might be mistaking the IRBMs for the drones, because that means that they would have drones that are far longer range than Ukraine's. And Ukraine, from what we know, has the longest range drones in the world right now that are able to reach about 1,000 miles out, maybe a little bit farther than that. But we've never seen drones that have been to the competency and range that the Ukrainians have. So I would say that a range of about 800 to 900 miles is definitely likely for Iranian drones, but any farther than that, that probably wouldn't be likely. That still means, however, regardless of whether it's 2,000 kilometers or 700 miles or so, that does mean that they can still launch a drone at the Strait of Hormuz from basically anywhere in their country, like you can see right here, even based off of the range that I would know. But the problem with that, though, is that with the incredibly long launch range, that means that they have an incredibly slow time for reaction, and they're not able to fire off their drones as quickly and as much in real time to the relevant situation within the strait as they would like, meaning that they basically just have to fly the drones out there and hope that something is there to hit by the time that they arrive, because if a drone is flying about 100 miles an hour or so, or somewhere around there, even at 200 miles an hour, from launch to impact, that drone would take about 4 to 5 hours to fly over Iran from its farthest in launching points to then try and get to the strait. And by that point, we might see that the situation has changed greatly, and that ship might have been able to generally make it either out of range or may have been able to try and find some armed support to be able to help it not get hit. Another thing that we also have to consider here is that while that is true, we generally have to find some way to clear the Strait of Hormuz, and at least with the direct threats that are posed from the coast, those are the quickest that can respond and give the smallest amount of reaction time. And while I'm not a big fan of invading on the coast either, and I don't really think that would be that wise or smart of an idea, I definitely have to agree with you on that. Clearing out Iran's anti-ship weaponry on the coast of any type and any variety is crucial to our military operations and also economic functions, because we have to find a way to at least make convoy duties possible within the strait. Right now, it'd be entirely impossible. If we see that those drones are being launched from 4 hours away or 5 hours away deep inside their country, and that gives us a 4 to 5 hour window of response time, that gives us enough time to scramble aircraft to conduct air defense in the strait against those incoming drones. That gives the Navy's vessels enough time to be able to prepare their air defenses properly. That gives them the kind of reaction time that they need that a passing of the strait normally and continuously would definitely be possible at that point. So I would agree with you on the point of landing on the coast really doesn't do much to change anything, and I've been saying that as well. I think that aerial bombardments could generally do the job, and at the last case scenario, if somehow that was not doing it, then ground incursions into Iran, or at least some amphibious invasions in a limited aspect, might be necessary, even if they end up going generally poorly. But outside of that, though, I would say that it would be an imperative at this point to reopen the Strait of Hormuz, at least in that way, because by then we'll still be able to buy ourselves a little bit of a reaction window, even if they still are able to fire at the ships, which even in my analysis they would be able to. It would just be a lot lower of an intensity and a lot slower, and would give us the reaction time we need, and also the lower density of fire that we would need to conduct convoy duties through the area. So a huge thanks to you so much once again for the support, and thank you, by the way, for choosing this channel to be your source of news. And also another funny thing that I gotta say, folks, I sent Matthew a clip today, and I gotta say, I was getting an absolute laugh out of this one. I was dying laughing. I sent Matthew a clip today from a mainstream news network, and they were talking about how the closure of the Strait of Hormuz is affecting international shipping. And I kid you not, folks, they said, because of the closure of the Strait of Hormuz, a whole bunch of ships are going around the Horn of Africa.
Oh, I made a post on Twitter today because it was kind of inspired by that a little bit. I'll be honest, I didn't even watch the full clip because I don't put any faith in the mainstream media whatsoever these days. They have good reporters that work at some of these channels, but the channels as a whole are a joke. But I know some people at some of the channels that are actually very good at their jobs. But at the same time, though, people look at the mainstream media and they see people wearing suits, they have a very serious tone, and they take everything they say as complete fact without any type of questioning whatsoever. And people will come here on the channel, like in the live chat, and they'll say, well, guys, this channel said this, and why are you reporting something different? You must be lying. And they just take whatever they're saying at face value. And it's like, it's like you can choose to take whoever you want at face value, but it's like me personally, I'm not taking mainstream media at face value. Absolutely not. Unless I have corroboration of something that they're saying, I'm not taking it at face value.
Oh, I was dying laughing, folks. They were like, because of the closure of the Strait of Hormuz, ships can't go through the Red Sea, so they're having to go around Africa. It's like, what world are they living in? Let me show you all this here really quickly. Does that look to y'all like ships are going around Africa? Looks to me like they're going through the Strait of Hormuz still. And also they're still going, well, not the Strait of Hormuz, but the Bab El Mendab, and they're still going to the Suez. So what world were these people in the mainstream news living in? I mean, there is a huge flow, by the way. I cannot understate that. There is a ginormous flow of ships that are always passing around Africa. But still, the general flow of ships going through the Suez hasn't really fallen off that much because nobody's really getting attacked there to make that necessary to take on all of that additional expense and time for a single voyage. Like, they were literally talking straight out of their ass. Like, I've never seen anything like that before. And they ran it as a legitimate news coverage and from a mainstream network. And what's even sadder, folks, is that like that video had like 200 or 300,000 views, meaning that there's like 200 or 300,000 people out there right now who think that the Strait of Hormuz is apparently the Bab El Mendab, I'm guessing. It's like, damn, it's like, I gotta tell y'all, folks, I've never seen mainstream news hit that much of a low, because for people to say that we don't know everything, I mean, the mainstream news has the hundreds of staff per company, hundreds of millions of dollars in budget per year, and they have people who are supposed to research all of this and figure it out off air. Unlike us, we have to figure all of this out and then cover it. and they still get stuff that egregiously wrong, like just basic facts and information. But it's still a humongous thanks to you so much for the support and helping this channel to keep on running. I hope that does address that incredibly well, Arthur Carty. And with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and our next super chat here is going to go to BC Skyman, another channel legend, and thank you very much, BC, for that combined $100 support, and we do appreciate it very much. And he left a super sticker on them, actually. Let me go back and take a look at that real quick. He left a super sticker, the classics, the YouTube controller saying super effective, and also the Doge creature saying you're amazing as well. With some fireworks going off around it, should be careful about that. OSHA may pay them a visit. But unfortunately, what say you?
I gotta say a humongous thanks to you for the support, PC Skyman, and we thank you greatly for being here with us tonight and supporting the channel. People have been wondering, where you been? Like, people have actually been asking about you in the live chat, and we are happy to have you back, and we thank you incredibly for that support and helping this channel to keep on running, because if it wasn't for folks like you, we wouldn't be able to make this channel possible, and we wouldn't be able to keep it running. And so a tremendous thanks to you so much once again. I hope that does address that incredibly well. And I also saw BC Skyman mention something about the TSA in the chat. Have y'all been seeing that? Like, the lines at the TSA are like 8 hours long at this point. To fly on a plane, folks, and this is something that's mental when you think about it. People are waiting in line at the TSA for like 8 hours now at most airports across the country. They get through the TSA to then wait in the terminal for probably another hour before their flight takes off, and then they get on the plane, and that's another 50 minutes of boarding, all to probably take maybe an hour and a half flight somewhere.
Yeah, and also they deployed immigrations and customs control to some of the airports to help them out. And it turns out that ICE, they can't even operate the scanners because they're not trained on what to look for when they're looking at the scanning data. Like when you put your bag through the X-ray scanner, they don't even know how to look at the images to know, if something's a threat or not. So they can't do that. So all they can do is just stand around and look like they're being busy, basically. So I heard that they're going to be deploying possibly the National Guard next. If the lines don't clear up soon, they're going to deploy some of the National Guard to help out, which that's going to be the same thing as deploying ICE. They don't know how to read the scanner details either, and that creates a huge security threat. Like, you can't have people that are untrained on the X-ray scanner trying to determine what they're looking at. It's like that's a recipe for disaster.
Man, bro, dude, they send ICE to the airport. They say, I don't know what to do. And then they're like, deploy the National Guard. Bro, the National Guard's going to be standing there with ICE next going, I don't know what to do. And then they're going to be like, I don't know.
Yeah. If I was an ICE agent, I would just offer, I would say, hey, look, I'll help the TSA out. You know how the TSA yells at people? Well, that's one thing that ICE is qualified to do. We can simply yell at people, and y'all can take a break on your vocal cords a little bit. We'll take over the yelling.
Oh, yeah, and y'all, it's been like absolute chaos. I mean, there's been like local sheriffs who have been having power trips just cussing out random people who are doing nothing because the lines are long. Like, it's been crazy. But I'll be honest with y'all, folks. I mean, I gotta be straight up for y'all. This has been the worst, month for aviation I've ever heard of. They're gonna be running out of fuel soon. There's no TSA, so everyone's waiting forever in security to take a flight that is hardly a fraction of the time that they're waiting in line in security now. I mean, to be entirely honest with you folks, I mean, Matthew's going to hate me saying this, but wouldn't it just make more sense for people to take the train at this point? Because they have no security, like literally none. And at this point, with the amount of time that you're waiting for security, then waiting in the airport, then boarding, and then finally flying on the plane to then go get your baggage out of baggage claim at the other airport, which takes time, wouldn't that just make more sense at this point to just spend all that time riding a train because you get there in the same time anyways? At least you're not standing in line for 8 hours. I mean, that seems to make more sense to me. But that's just my opinion, and I'm a huge pusher of the railroads in the country, so don't take my word for it. I'm very biased. But anyways, with that, it is time for us to get on to our final question of the segment, and then we're going to be getting on into the rest of the news. So Matthew, what do we got?
All right, and also real quick, let me do a fact check on something real quick, because I see someone in here saying, why are y'all lying? The videos are still on the White House's Instagram. Well, apparently, according to my sources, they were saying that they were deleted, but I'll do a check real quick. I'll see if they're actually there. I'll pull it up literally right this second, and we'll do a on-the-spot check, because maybe they're right, maybe they're wrong, but we'll find out, though. Let's see here. And let's see if this is the video right here. So there is one of them that remains posted, but the other one is not posted though. So one of them has been deleted and one of them hasn't. So I guess we're half lying, half truthing, I guess you could say. So we'll keep an eye on it though. But on the other platforms though, I don't see it. It looks like it's disappeared. But moving into our last super chat, this one goes to Fred Vreeman, who puts in a $100 support. And thank you very much, Fred, for that support as well. He said, here's an idea. The 15 islands in the Gulf will be seized and taken by the U.S. and then turned over to a new territory of the Persian Gulf owned by Arab nations, and many with claims to the Gulf Islands, and the territory plus U.S. will then seize land from Iran needed to secure its waters. Now, I will say, Fred, like that's like anything's possible, but the catch is this though. Are we going to be able to invade, for example, even one island, like let's say, for example, Kharg Island, perhaps, and without taking massive casualties? That's my problem. If we could take those islands without casualties, I would say go for it. Why not? But the problem is, though, we don't want to cause our guys to get taken out in huge numbers, and we do not want to see, for the first time in the history of the United States, Marines getting taken out by Iranian drones. That would hurt me dramatically to see that, to say the least, and it would obviously hurt us all to see the Marines getting hit by drones. So if we could do it without casualties, I would be for it. But the problem is, though, I don't see any type of explanation for how the Marines can hold those islands without being completely vulnerable to drone attacks, which is going to result in mass casualties. In fact, we even heard today that the Gulf states are even warning the United States that it could be a mass casualty situation. So even they're warning the United States about that, which makes sense. But Enforcer, what say you?
I got an idea, Fred. I'm kind of working on that. I would have to agree with Matthew. Land invasions or amphibious invasions are probably going to end up in pretty high casualties. And so that's why I'm generally not a fan of them either. But what if we did this instead? What if we declared, and Iran had to agree to, a demilitarized zone along their coastline to a certain extent inland, to where no IRGC, Islamic Republic of Armed Forces, or any other armed force, even including the besieged, would not be allowed to operate near to the coastline at a specific distance. It would basically be kind of like post-war Germany after World War I, where they were not allowed to militarize the Rhineland, and it was actually militarily occupied, at least at a time, by the French. But this wouldn't be occupied by anyone, but it would be observed and inspected, and we would be allowed to fly reconnaissance drones over the area to ensure, and also take satellite photography, to ensure that there are no forces within that area. That stops us from having to physically take anything and possibly incur losses, but it also allows for us to ensure that they're not able to directly arm forces on the Strait of Hormuz and conduct another blockade like this again. And I see Why Not Cougar saying they won't do that. I mean, maybe not, but at the same time, we're kind of like, we're drawing short straws at this point. Like a ground incursion, it might work, but then it could also lead to incredibly high losses, and how many losses is the U.S. willing to stomach to achieve something? Or we could try and do this, which they might not agree to, but then we just need to bomb them into submission. But once again, everything comes back to, at least in my opinion, with grand strategy right now, clearing out the Strait of Hormuz. That's why they're holding on right now. It's literally the only thing they're getting us on. We ought to clear out the Strait of Hormuz. If they lose any sort of leverage, they will basically have to agree to whatever we want, because it will only be a matter of time before everyone who's trying to be, pretty much thick-headed gets bombed by the U.S. forces. So, they'll eventually have to agree to something if they have no leverage.
Yeah, and also ask everybody that's for an invasion of, for example, Kharg Island and places like this, like the islands that are on Iran's coast. Ask yourself the question: what is the actual objective behind taking those islands? Because the U.S. is specifically thinking about a ground invasion because they were refusing to hit with airstrikes the oil infrastructure on Kharg Island. They don't want to hit that, so they would rather send in troops on the ground, presumably, to go and take the island. So what's the point of doing that? And the only reason the U.S. would do something like that is if they're trying to put leverage against Iran by basically holding Kharg Island hostage and hurting the Iranian oil economy and trying to get China to put pressure on Iran to open the Strait of Hormuz. That's the only reason to do that. In my opinion, that same objective can be accomplished by simply airstriking Kharg Island. That would prevent our people from being put in harm's way. And obviously, I don't want to risk our people over trying to basically do a Venezuela 2.0 on Iran. I don't want to do that. I don't want to see Marines getting put in danger over trying to take the oil infrastructure, so that way we can try to basically take the oil for ourselves, for America. The oil's not worth lives. It's not worth it. So that's the only reason I'm seeing them do that right now, is they want to take over Kharg so we can control the exports from Iran instead of simply just destroying them from the air.
That's definitely true. I also saw someone say, it was, I believe Howard Mendelsohn said, they refuse to talk to us. That's true, but we need to have an idea and a plan of what we're going for at this point right now. Because yeah, they're not talking to us, but enough elbow grease, which in other words is bombs, enough bombs, and they'll eventually start to talk, especially if we end up clearing out the Strait of Hormuz. Because, like, to put this out there again, folks, this is where we're at right now. We are obliterating them militarily every day, but they are going to economically take us out to the woodshed with the Strait of Hormuz. So right now, it's a bit of the best way to say it, a Mexican standoff. Because if we take them out, by the time we take them out, they've taken us out another way economically. So that's why they're holding on right now. If we can get control of the Strait of Hormuz, which should be our only and top priority at this moment, they have lost their leverage. It's no longer a Mexican standoff. It is now a one-sided arrangement to where we have the gun aimed at them and they don't have one aimed at us. And from there, we can generally see that once we have complete control of the situation, we can just start slowly targeting and knocking out their officials until we see one that comes around that doesn't want to get his head put on the chopping block, and then he actually negotiates and generally agrees to most of our terms. That's not going to happen now. It's probably going to be a good bit in the future, because we have to, one, clear the Strait of Hormuz, and then two, continue to largely bomb the Iranian government, the IRGC, and their other forces, and then eventually see that one of them comes around, or at least enough of them come around that decide, I'm basically going to die, so instead of dying, I'm just going to agree to whatever they want, because at least I'll be able to live at that point. So I hope that does address that the best I can, because I'll definitely agree to you. They're certainly not going to talk to us now, but we got to get them in a position to where they are going to talk, and when they talk, what are we going to demand? And that's what we need to figure out right now, instead of trying to figure that out when we get to that point. So with that, I hope that does address that the best I can, in my opinion. But with that, folks, it is time for us to move on out of this question segment and on into the rest of the news that we have for the night. Moving us on over into Israel, we were able to see that Hezbollah has continued to fire their Qassam bottle rockets at the state of Israel within the northern regions, which we're able to see right here once again.
Yo!
Yo! Turn up.
Those are pretty loud rockets. Sound like missiles.
Yeah, they are. I think those might be the Iron Domes trying to intercept the incoming Qassams, maybe. But moving us further on down, we also saw that near to the area of the town of Hadera, there was also a fairly significant strike that the Iranians conducted here. They almost hit the major Orat Rabin power plant in Hadera, which we could see the impacts around the areas right here, and we can also see an impact right near to the facility of the Hadera power plant right here as well, showing that Iran is trying now to directly target and hit Israeli energy infrastructure, which is a war crime. Moving on from that, I bet you money, man, someone's about to come in here. There's no such thing as a war crime. It's like, oh yeah, what happened to all those Germans that were in charge of Germany at the end of World War II in Nuremberg? Well, I don't think they were all executed just for the hell of it. I think it was they were executed for war crimes and crimes against humanity. So generally, they do exist.
Yeah. It's never a good thing when you hear people saying, oh, those pesky rules of engagement, piss off with those rules right there. We don't need those. That's just getting in the way of progress. It's like that's not what you want to hear coming from a country that claims to be the moral beacon of the world, or somehow the free, the seat of freedom of the world. It's not a good sign hearing that.
And it's always funny to me, folks, that everyone always says that the rules of engagement are Geneva suggestions and everything. It's always funny to me because I feel like if y'all were the defenseless, unarmed individual that had a soldier aiming a gun at you, you would think a lot differently about that, and you would generally want them to follow the Geneva Convention. Because unlike foreign policy, where I say that it's rules for thee and not for me, when it comes to war, we fight with morals and we fight with a conscience. If we don't, and we're fighting like barbarians, what makes us any different than the enemy that we're fighting? I mean, people here in America, folks, they say, oh, the Iranians and the Islamic regime, they're nothing but barbarians. They take no quarter. They take no prisoners. But we're totally different because we take no quarter and we take no prisoners and we conduct war crimes endlessly. It's like, well, how are we any different? How in the world can you have even a propaganda initiative of having any moral superiority to your adversary by saying, they might be barbaric in how they fight wars, but we're not, so therefore we're better. You can't even take that approach if you just say, let's fight it like a barbarian. And also on top of that, what in the world would y'all's ancestors think about it? I mean, the United States has fought every war about as honorably as we can, and soldiers who went out of their way to conduct the barbarisms that people talk about these days would be hung by execution by a U.S. court-martial usually. I mean, there was hundreds of U.S. soldiers that would go to court-martial in Europe and be hung for their crimes against the people of the occupied nations or the liberated nations that we were marching through for what they had done. So, I mean, that's not really something I'm a big fan of. And I know that, sometimes war crimes aren't caught and punished, but in general, the United States is not one to throw the Geneva Convention out of the window. We are a civilized nation with civilized values, and we should stick to that, even if our enemies are not, but to an extent. If the enemy does something to us first, like hit one of our power plants, then it's a blank open check for us to do whatever we want to their power plants. But we're not going to go to the point of just conducting absolutely depraved acts just because it's war. That would be absolutely barbaric. But moving on from that and on into Tel Aviv, we also were able to see further interceptions over central Israel in the Tel Aviv city area. Let's take a look.
Oh,
Wow.
wow.
And this is the FIFA trophy. It comes with the key. Oh, wow.
Man, did you see the like herd of crows like going over, not the herd, but the flock of crows like going over Israel today? That video that came out.
I did. I didn't repost it, but I did see it.
It was very weird. I saw that video earlier. That video right there you just showed reminded me of it for some reason. I was like, that's like really weird. Apparently, it is like there's like migration of birds or something like that happens. But I will admit, it was like in the midst of like missile fire and stuff like that, and it was really odd to see it.
Yeah, I would have to say it was weird, but I was like, I don't know. I was like, I probably won't show that one. And also I see some people in the chat talking about the whole war crimes thing, and people are like, it's about the strongest. Here's the thing, though. I'm going to speak just a little bit honestly here, because I say no politics, no religion, but I'm going to talk a little bit honestly here. I'm a Christian, and being a Christian means that you adhere to some sort of a moral compass at the end of the day, because Christians aren't supposed to be barbarians. And what does it say about people who claim that they're of the Christian faith when they say that we can basically conduct heinous acts that are specifically mentioned in the Ten Commandments and other Christian doctrine that you're not supposed to conduct? Our enemies may be barbarians, but that does not mean that I or any of my countrymen have to be barbarians, not just on religious circumstance, but on the fact that this country is built on moral principle, and one of a higher standing and a higher purpose than just being an animalistic barbarian. I'm not a Viking from the Norse lands in the Middle Ages going to loot and pillage England. I'm an American citizen of the 21st century, and here we have something called standards and morals. And I think a lot of people need to understand that you can't talk about how righteous and pious you are, whether you're religious or a-religious, if you go around saying that you can conduct heinous actions against other peoples, no matter what. I don't agree with that. But anyways, getting back to our clips out of Tel Aviv, we were able to see continued interceptions over their skies here in this clip as well. Yo! Moving on from that and on into our next clip, we were also able to see further actions over the skies of Israel here as well. Moving on from that and on into our next clip. Oh, this one appears to have frozen, and it appears, for some reason, the entire screen has frozen. What is going on with that? Oh, there we go. We have been able to get it back under control. Matthew, are you still there with us?
Yeah, I'm still here.
That's weird. That clip froze the entire Google Chrome, interface. But moving on from that clip, if we can, and let me see if we can, there we go. Moving on from that clip and on into our next ones, we have also been able to see that near to the Jerusalem area, apparently Netanyahu has ordered that maximum efforts are to be made to cause as much damage to Iran as possible within the next 48 hours, as it is believed that the United States might be trying to make a deal, but I'll be honest with you all, the Israeli government is just wanting an excuse to go all in again and possibly bungle the situation once more like they have about 2 times over at this point, so we can ask them for some restraint, and then they won't. So with that, I hope that does address all of our news out of the Middle East over the course of the day. And it's now time for us folks to move on up into Europe, as we've been able to get absolutely humongous amounts of news out of the area, specifically of the Baltics and the Leningrad military oblast, or military district, over the course of the day. Moving us on into our largest news of the day, which I've got to be honest with you all, is a little bit interesting how little coverage it's got and how little attention people have given it. I'll be straight up with you all. I think people have gotten desensitized to Russian aggression, because I put out a video on this today, and like YouTube works an algorithm to where they push stuff depending on if people would be interested in it or not. Y'all wouldn't believe it, folks. YouTube basically didn't push it at all, which shows that, weirdly enough, a lot of people just consider any act of Russian aggression at this point to just be status quo, which I think is a little bit concerning because I think people have been desensitized to what the Russians are doing a little bit too much. But, you know, that is what it is at this point. They've done so much stuff and we've reacted to so little of it, nobody really cares anymore, which, you know, that's what happens. But moving on into Latvia, we were able to hear that one Russian drone entered Estonia and one Russian drone entered Latvia. The one that entered Latvia crashed within a farm field and was unarmed. The situation in Estonia was a lot different. In Estonia, near to the Narva River, near to the city of Narva, is a significant Estonian power plant. You can see it right here. This power plant generally operates from a delicious source of energy, which I believe, looking at these cars right here, probably coal. Not entirely sure on that, though. But the thermal power plant, sorry folks, the power plant was actually directly hit today by the drone. And it was hit directly onto a smokestack. It didn't cause any damage that completely knocked out any of the boilers or the furnaces inside the power plant, which means that the power plant is still operational and it is still producing power. But if you look at that right there, that is actually a puncture through the side of the smokestack, which appears to be from some sort of an explosive charge. I can't say that for certain, though, because it is quite small. But the fact that it was able to puncture through entirely, and there's also what appears to be this sort of shrapnel damage on the smokestack, possibly suggests that this drone was actually armed with an explosive. Maybe. And this also, regardless of that, is the first time that a Russian drone has ever directly hit a piece of critical infrastructure anywhere in NATO over the past 1,491 days since the war in Ukraine started. And that makes this a fairly significant and historic event for that reason. And a lot of people are currently talking about this right now. And Matthew, what are people thinking about it? And what are you thinking about it as well?
Okay, so I will say it is very odd that there's been little coverage on this, like the enforcer was mentioning. It seems like either people have been desensitized or the algorithm's not pushing it or something like that. Sort of weird, but it's a big story. In fact, it's a massive story, actually, that both Latvia and Estonia had Russian drones come across the border and not only come across the border, but actually exploded, one of them on a smokestack at a power plant, and also the other one apparently crashed and exploded in a field somewhere inside of the other Baltic state. So what is this all about, basically? Because obviously it seems to be a bit of a pattern. 60% said Russia's testing NATO responses, while 16% said Russia's trying to scare the Baltics, and 14% said Russia's testing the U.S. reaction specifically. And I'm actually with the 15%. Russia is trying to see how strongly the U.S. would react to something like this. They're trying to see how good their handiwork is. And they see that the U.S. gave zero reaction to this. I did not see any reaction personally coming out of the United States directly responding to the situation, which that could tell Russia one of two things. It could say that maybe the U.S. is occupied in Iran and they're simply too tied up to think about it. Or number two, largely the United States is going to pretty much abandon the Baltics and not come to their aid if something like this happens. Either way, it's not a good response. So the message that Russia has sent is largely they'll do what they want to the Baltics. There will be largely no response from NATO, and nobody will even bat an eye at it. And not only that, but it won't even get news coverage on top of that. So I'm sure that has Latvia and Estonia worried, and it probably has given Russia a little bit of an emboldenment, I would say. But Enforcer, what say you?
I'd have to say that I'm with the 60%. I think that's more so testing general NATO responses, which we haven't heard of anything from anybody about this. No government in NATO has made a statement. The Estonian government hasn't made a statement. Nobody's made a statement, which I gotta say, folks, is wildly concerning because it's putting us forward as a weak alliance. This was a direct hit on the area of a power plant, and not only that, caused direct damage, superficial at that, to the power plant. And there's been no response by anybody. I mean, this is a complete fumble on everyone's end. America's end, Europe's end, and Estonia's end. Nobody has said anything about this for the larger part on an official governmental level. And this is quite concerning to me because we're basically just opening it up that Russia can just do more and more and keep pushing the barrier. And we're basically going to do nothing, no matter what. And I see some people saying, well, this could have been a Ukrainian false flag. No, no, it was not Ukrainian drones. It was Russian drones. They were tracked all the way from basically their launch point in Russia to their sites of impact in Latvia and Estonia. They have been confirmed by the Estonian government and the Latvian government, as far as they were willing to make statements that these were guaranteed Russian drones. They were not Ukrainian drones. So that is the situation that we're working with right now, and it does appear that is the ongoing situation, at least at the moment. But moving on from that, and moving on up into the Leningradskaya Oblast, we have to get on into the big news from Leningrad Military Oblast. Matthew, do you think that Lenin is glad about what's happening right now?
I think he might need some detergent. I think the linens are dirty.
Man, I gotta tell you, man, there's a lot of Russian military commanders crying themselves to sleep in their soft linens at night, and they're not very glad about this whole situation.
Man, I'll tell you what, Lenin needs a shower. Those linens right there is walking around like Pigpen off of Charlie Brown with a dust cloud around him at this point.
Man, I'm not gonna lie, man. Bro, Lenin be looking like this right now, man. He be looking like that. Yeah, man.
Give him some Tide because the tides are turning.
Man, I gotta tell you, man, Lenin ain't doing well. I mean, he's not doing well at all up here. So, to give you all a little bit of a summary, over the past 2 days, the Ukrainians have decided, like, for some reason, Zelensky woke up and he said, I need to bomb something. And his general said, do you want to do Belgrade again? And he said, no, that's becoming formulaic. Too common. We have to think up something bigger. And they said, Leningrad? And Zelensky said, that's it. Let's bomb Leningrad. So they have been bombing Leningrad, which is St. Petersburg, by the way, for 2 days straight. Straight up, 3 rounds of attacks. There was a new round of attacks that was starting while we were going live. And the damage has been significant. The port of Primorsk, which I'll show y'all right here because I didn't get any new clips for it today, but this is still what it looks like today. The port of Primorsk is burning to the ground. This was one of only 2 major oil ports that the Russians have up here in the Baltic. And they only have, I think, let me think, like, about 5 of them on their west coast. There's 3 in the Black Sea. There's the port of Taman, Novorossiysk, and Tuapse. And then there's 2 up here in the Baltic, which would be Ust Luga and this one at Primorsk. Not only is this one still burning to the ground, but we got a picture out of Ust Luga today, which is painted what I can only describe as an absolutely dreadful and hellish scene from the very bottom rings of hell. Let me show you what Ust Luga looks like right now.
Oh man, look at that, Ust Luga. Oh my goodness. Oh geez, man. What are those ships on fire? Or is that the dock?
That's the dock. The ships just are in close proximity to it.
Holy moly. Well, at least the tugboats made it out.
And also, it appears that Emmy here was actually able to do some geolocation and was able to show us that definitely is the oil loading port that's on fire up there. Here it is. Here's the port itself from a satellite view, which we're going to look at here in a moment. And those are the oil tanks at at Ust Luga, actually. So this port is burning to the ground at the moment. And let me go show y'all Ust Luga. This is the largest oil loading port that they have in the whole of Russia. There is no other larger one on their west coast. I think the largest one outside of this would be the oil loading port of Taman down near Crimea. But that one is a little bit smaller than this one even, and is not able to handle the volume and traffic that Ust Luga is capable of. Ust Luga is also, by the way, folks, funnily enough, their only modern built port that was built from the ground up for these sorts of operations, which I kind of ought to give you all an idea of how backwards ass the Russians really are, because they only have one modern port. The rest of them were basically refit Soviet era ports for the larger sense of it. But we also got a little bit more out of Ust Luga today. Let's take a look at the damage up close. Look at that burning inferno. Man, that's rough. Let's take a look at this one.
Там горит порт, никого не пропускают дальше. Вот до этого перекрестка и все.
Man, they got the banana van out here.
Yeah, really?
Man, they said, we're gonna rack it down to Petroleum Avenue, and then we're gonna burn it higher. Man, it's like, bro.
Там гаишники стоят. Туда дальше не дают проехать. Короче, такая тут ситуация.
This guy right here with the moaning and stuff. Oh, jeez.
He's like smacking on a gum too. He's like, Man, the port of mine is on fire. It's a rough day. Bro, it's like, bro, you need to calm down, dude.
Yeah, I'll tell you what, this fire does something to some Russians. They see fire and all of a sudden it's just, ooh.
Man, they see it and they just can't help it. I mean, there's an arsonist deep in the soul of every Russian. Like, it comes out whenever they watch something on fire like this. But moving on from that, we also got another clip of the fires at Ust Luga. Let's take a look. Is this going to affect the lark population?
I don't know. I feel like it's going to affect the lungs.
Man, some Russian right now in like in St. Petersburg, they're like, damn, my lungs feel musty. It's like it's the oil smoke.
This will definitely make the Russians look like Pigpen with that dust cloud around them.
Man, right now in St. Petersburg.
Can you imagine? Can you imagine, like, it's going to start raining oil here, like we've seen in Iran? It'll probably start doing that here because that's literally, it's being vaporized and put into the sky from that facility. So it's probably going to have, like, a bunch of ash and a bunch of, like, you know, oil soot, like, probably all over the ground.
Man, probably it would. Man.
I feel like the air filter industry in Russia might be a good business to get in.
Oh, look, it's the group of local Russian arsonists. They're like, damn, if only we could have done this. Like, it's like, that is a huge fire, by the way, over there. Dang, I gotta tell you, they're not having a good day up here in this region. Oh, by the way, one more thing, we also were able to see one last clip of the fire in the distance right here as well. This is what it looks like at night right now. And I think, folks, this is where Putin's spawn come from, like types like him. It's the pits of hell, you see. They've opened wide up out there, and he's crawling out of the ground. So that way, when his current form dies, he's able to take the place of the current Putin with a new one. So it looks like the Russians have elected a new Putin. But moving on out of that, we've also been able to see something else that happened, quite interestingly, before we get to this little bit of news right here, up in Vyborg. Now, Vyborg was a town that we didn't really realize why they were getting hit yesterday, and I did some looking today, folks, and I found out why they were getting hit, and it's because of this little area right here, and this little spot right here. This is actually a shipbuilder's right here. And Matthew, what type of ship do you think that they build in Vyborg?
Do I get a prize if I get it right?
Yes.
Okay, good. I have a feeling, I don't know, like, it's a tough one. I have a feeling it could be icebreakers.
Congratulations! You're correct.
Oh, very nice, very nice. Can I see a picture of one? I like to see it rolled over.
Yes, yes. There, you get to see picture. Holy mo!
Oh, yeah, look at that. Treating the icebreaker like a dog. Roll over, Fido. Look at that thing.
Let's take another look at it. Oh!
Oh, man, look at that. They kind of need that for their Arctic ambitions. They kind of needed that a little bit. I guess they'll be delayed in their progress.
Oh, up to you, man. Please. Well, beyond that, the reason why this is a big one, folks, for the Ukrainians to have targeted is that the Russians are trying to rapidly expand the fleet of icebreakers that they have. These aren't the large ones that y'all know, the nuclear-powered ones that the Russians used. These are smaller ones, and these are incredibly important for the maintenance of continued shipping lanes near St. Petersburg and also up in the Arctic Circle at Murmansk. And because of the Black Sea issues that they're having right now, in general Russian planning, and also due to the melting ice caps in the North Pole, they want to be able to use these icebreakers to generally see that their naval abilities are expanded massively in the Arctic Circle. And the Ukrainians are hitting it, and that means that their shipbuilding capacity and their grander strategic ambitions outside of the war in Ukraine are now even being stymied by the Ukrainians just because the Ukrainians are like, screw them, that's why. And so they just went and blew up the icebreaker shipbuilders. And so it looks like they're going to be falling behind on their production quotas, sadly. You can also see a couple of them here that haven't even been painted.
Also, when I saw this earlier today, I was thinking this seems like less about something that Ukraine would really be worried about. This is something that the U.S. is worried about quite a lot. That was part of the reason why you heard all that Greenland talk about, all that crazy talk about invading Greenland, is because the U.S. was getting worried that with the ice caps melting up there near Greenland, it's going to start opening up new passageways for ships to go through. So these icebreakers right here are a huge initiative that Russia's been building for quite some time. I think Russia has the largest icebreaker fleet in the world for the most part. So this right here is actually something the U.S. is really concerned about. So I wouldn't be surprised if maybe the U.S. asked Ukraine to carry this out, because it seems like it really doesn't benefit Ukraine a whole bunch, but it definitely benefits the United States.
Also saw some people saying, looking at this flat map, it's so confusing. And I definitely agree with that. Let me see. Did they take the globe option away from this map? Okay, I think I have to go here. Hold up, folks. There we go. So, this is what it really looks like up here. This is about the best I can show it to y'all. Well, let me get that cloud a layer away. So this is what it actually looks like up here outside of Vyborg. This is about how close the Russians are to us. It doesn't look, well, it looks like a lot, but let me measure it for y'all really quickly and show y'all. To Greenland, they're only about 1,000 miles away. And to here, at least off the coast of Canada, they're only about 2,000 miles away. And that is compared to a straight shot, say from St. Petersburg to here, which would be about 3,900 miles or so. This is the best way I can probably show this to y'all, is with a globe instead of the flat map, which uses the Mercator projection, which increases the size of everything as it's heading towards the pole. So everything towards the South Pole gets larger, and everything heading up towards the North Pole gets larger, and everything at the equator looks quite small. So I hope that shows that the best that I can, but let me go and turn that back into a flat map.
Also, by the way, the U.S. was worried about all these ships passing so close to Greenland, not just the Russian ships passing close to Greenland, but also the Chinese vessels too, because this is a big concern for both China and Russia, is opening up new trade routes through that area near Greenland and in the Arctic region like that. They're very concerned about that whole situation. That's why they're building icebreakers in Russia. But, it's like, I thought the U.S. was saying that, generally speaking, these cargo ships that Russia's outfitting and also China's outfitting to be basically covert weapons of war that have like drones on them and stuff like that. And they're designed to look like commercial container ships, but they're actually weapons of war. I thought they said that wasn't that big of a concern, but, they're apparently very worried about them passing very close to Greenland, which is a very strategic location for Patufik and other bases.
I would definitely have to agree. I mean, it's a little interesting to me. It seems that they're showing some interest in this, and also it seems that the Ukrainians are helping us out with that again. It looks like they're big friends. We also got to hear that the Leningrad governor stated that 33 drones have been shot down, and a little fire, just a little one in Ust Luga, is being extinguished, and there's no casualties. So very reassuring from the governor. It's not like everyone can look north of the city of St. Petersburg and see the giant plume of smoke at Primorsk and the one down to the west from Ust Luga and get the idea. It's not just a little fire, But also, I see someone ringing the trolley bell. Ding, 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 and we got to get to it. So Matthew, what do we got?
Okay, so we're hearing the reports say that 40% of Russia's oil export capacity has been halted after these strikes in Ust Luga and Primorsk with these massive Ukrainian strikes. So what happens now? 54% said the Russian oil economy will continue to fail even worse with these strikes. 26% said Russia will likely escalate and do something crazy, while 14% said Russia will not be badly affected by it. And I can promise you this, it's definitely going to affect Russia. This is essentially the manual replacement of sanctions that the U.S. just lifted on Russia. Ukraine decided to undo that decision. They did the Control-Z, I think that's the undo key on the keyboard, and they undid it, which is honestly not a bad move because that was a stupid decision by the United States, and it looks like Ukraine said no, so they kind of reversed it a bit. So I would say, I think the Russian oil economy will definitely continue to fail. That's going to be a very big problem. And also, because the oil exports have been reduced by 40%, that pretty much guarantees that Diddy will never live in Russia. But Enforcer, what say you?
I've heard that there is a certain person looking for baby oil, and sadly they will get none of it here. Blow that.
Like, shit, like, and then they hit it. But I'd have to say that, in my opinion, I think that the Russian economy is kind of a little screwed because, they thought, the Russians thought for a minute, just a minute, that they were going to have a nice chance of making some sweet, sweet cash and floating the economy for just a little longer. And then the Ukrainians came along and blew up all the ports that they could use to try and make that money. So I think that they're kind of screwed. And the Russian economy is probably going to continue to fail because they won't be able to take advantage of this little brief moment of opportunity that the U.S. administration has given them. Because we all know, folks, that Russia is truly a friend of the United States of America. And that also lets us obviously know that the Ukrainians are the bad guys for allowing an enemy of the United States to fund itself and arm itself for an even longer period of time. Who the hell kind of an ally is Ukraine at that? That's ridiculous. Russia is our biggest friend. And also, I have to say on top of that, Zelensky is an absolute goblin. I mean, have y'all seen that? Like, trying to fix our own mistakes? Can you imagine that? The gall of this guy to try and fix a mistake of ours for ourselves. That's something that we're supposed to do. And this guy's doing it for us. What kind of friend is that? And all jokes aside, that is a good friend. A friend in Ukraine is a friend indeed. And, as long as you're not, a border guard that's being bribed with like $10,000 to illegally cross the border into like Poland or something, generally they're pretty cool. So with that, it is time for us to move on into the rest of our news, as we have been able to hear some interesting statements from the Ukrainians. The Ukrainians have claimed, man, you remember the clips that we were watching from Ust Luga and Primorsk, right? Of like the near lightning strike speed at which these explosions were happening. So the Ukrainians have claimed that what they actually hit the ports with were these A-22 light sport aircraft that had a bomb underslung on them.
I can kind of see that because these right here could carry pretty big munitions on them, probably much larger than a normal conventional Ukrainian drone could carry. I can kind of see that, but also though, I mean, presumably it's a dumb bomb if it's dropped from this thing. I presume it's a dumb bomb because it's being dropped right over its target. So how to create a flash like that? Because I've never seen flashes quite that large from a dumb bomb.
Oh, no, man. They didn't drop it. They rammed it into the thing. Like, they literally kamikazed the plane right into the oil tanks. That's what they're saying.
Well, how would they even create the flash even if they just rammed this thing into the object and then it blew up?
That's what I'm thinking. Something's not adding up about that. One, we didn't hear the noise of a propeller in any of the clips. And two, the explosions seem to be quite odd and not really the ones that we've seen from fabs in the past. And that's leading me to think that this might not be the actual answer. However, there is a little bit of credence to what they're saying. We did get to see one still of a security camera somewhere in the Leningrad Oblast that did show one of these things in the air.
Well, then, there it is, flying in. How the hell does Ukraine keep getting these massive, and these are massive on the scale of drones. These are literal small private planes flying over their airspace. How the hell does Russian air defense keep missing these things? It's not like it's a small target.
Dude, Russian air defense is asleep, man. Like they're not even around. They don't even know what the hell they're doing.
it's like Ukraine literally flew in a small fleet of like private aircraft into Russian airspace, literally straight through the Primorsk area, the Primorsk area of the airspace, literally prime airspace. Flew it straight through, no air defense shooting the thing down. I'm like, Ukraine could literally put a landing force into Russia like that if they wanted to. Like there's no air defense.
Man, you know what's kind of funny to me, man, is that like these things came in, man, and a Russian air traffic controller in Kursk probably went, hello, this is Kursk air traffic control, and then Zelensky got up on the microphone.
Yes, this is I love bombing Russia 2937 requesting vector to bearing 330, climb and maintain 5000.
Yes, approved. And then the Kursk air traffic. That's really weird. I haven't seen air traffic from Ukraine in like 4 years. Really odd. And they just went back to sleep or something. It's like it is quite odd, man. It's like how in the hell did the Ukrainians just fly planes like this through Russia and Russia doesn't do anything?
Yeah, I will say, like I saw someone point out, they said you really can't see any munition on the bottom of this aircraft right here. And I don't really see it myself. Obviously, the video is very blurry. It's like a screenshot or something here that we're looking at. But I don't see an outline like we saw in that still image of it sitting on the ground. I don't see the munition on the bottom of the aircraft. So maybe they put it inside some of them possibly, but I don't think there's a whole bunch of room in those. I think they're pretty tight space in the interior.
So, how they build some of them is that they make them a little less crude, and they build them like this. Let me go show you the picture. They build them like that. The bomb's inside the plane.
Yeah, but I mean, It doesn't seem like, because you remember on the inside of these planes here, even the ones they've heavily modified, there's still a lot of control surfaces they've had to like modify to the interior of the plane to make it work as a drone. There's a lot of moving parts, so you can't just put the munition right in the center because you'll be literally interfering with the control surfaces. So I don't know, like these are very small to fit a munition of that size that we saw in the undercarriage on that last image we just looked at a minute ago. It seems like it'd be kind of hard to fit that in there.
But you know, Mandy, this actually isn't the first time that someone has, flown like a light aircraft through Russian airspace and made it somewhere where they're not supposed to be. There was actually a West German kid back in the day who took off in a Cessna and he flew it all the way to Moscow and landed it in Red Square at the height of the Cold War in the mid 80s. And they literally didn't catch him the whole time. He was either in East German airspace, Polish airspace, or Soviet airspace. And he literally just flew all the way to Moscow. Let me go pull up the picture of that. Cessna landing at Kremlin. Here we go. Here we are. Dude, you're not going to believe this when you see it. Probably the best ad I've ever seen for a Cessna. But there it is.
Oh, look at that.
Man, he showed up, he said, I want world peace. And the KGB went, you're under arrest. And then they arrested the guy and they left the plane there. But, this kid actually flew all the way in. And I mean, nobody was scrambled. Nobody even really cared. He just communicated with the air traffic controllers like it was normal air traffic. They didn't really look into him much at all. And flying back then in the Soviet Union, folks, was supposed to be, by the regulations, very restrictive and very difficult to do unless you had authorization. And this kid obviously didn't have the authorization. He wasn't even a Soviet aircraft. And somehow he still was able to manage his way all the way to Moscow. So, I mean, the Russians or the Soviets have never particularly had a really good history with, dealing with their airspace. Like, they are generally pretty bad at it historically. But moving on from that, it is time for us to get out of that area of northern Russia, and it's time for us to move on down into the war in Ukraine. It's time for us to get to the real business down here. Moving us on into our location unknowns, we were able to see a decent casualty report today. Finally, some nice effing food. And we were able to see that Miss Disa, keeper of the record, stated that 2,459 drones shot down is the second highest daily loss. March to date, troop losses back to over 1,000 a day. And 196 vehicles ranks as the 18th highest loss. Note, 51 artillery is the actual increase, 38,746 is the total. And so, let's just get on into the figures. 1,220 Russian soldiers were wounded and killed over the past 24 hours. 3 APCs, 196 supply trucks, 6 main battle tanks, 51 artillery pieces, 2,459 drones, and 23 cruise missiles. Quite a decent day. And we love to see it. We love to see it, don't we, folks? Heavens we do. Moving us on up into Kavyansk, we were able to see the Ukrainians are once again showing that they physically control the center of Kavyansk as they are walking through it. It's mostly destroyed, but they did take it back from the Russians, which is a big thing. Moving on from that and down the line towards Svatove, we also were able to see the Ukrainians are whipping out those autonomous defense drones, which can now be controlled from 100 kilometers away, and kind of do a little bit of the targeting themselves. Look at this work.
Tell you, war's getting lazy at this point. They got AI doing the targeting, the flying. They got them doing everything. Honestly, it's pretty good. Like, all the Ukrainians have to do at this point is manufacture them and generally supervise for the most part, and then the drones do the rest.
Man, does that mean that the Russians get to say, I'd like to speak to your manager, to the drone, and then they have to go get, like, the Ukrainian supervisor in charge?
Well, I've heard there's going to be a little bit of a problem in Ukraine. They're complaining about they're getting replaced by AI, like the drone operators. They want their jobs back.
Really?
No, not really.
I was about to say,
No.
I was about to be like, they want to keep their job. I was like, huh.
No, they're in the military anyway. They'll have a job no matter what they're doing. They'll simply probably get reassigned or something.
Man, honestly, that's real. Moving on down to Makivka, we also were able to see them hitting the Russian guns. And, oh, they got that. They hitting that loud drum and bass. Dang. And they hitting them Russians. Damn. Oh, look at that. Oh, get him. Oh, get him. Man, they're knocking out artillery left and right up here.
They got the CD charge ready.
Man, yeah, that's good. Man, that was smart. I like that one. That was pretty damn good.
I remember back in the day when I was young, we used to have CD-ROM.
I remember back in the day when we used to have floppy disks.
You know what CD-ROM stands for?
Um, no.
Without looking it up, compact disc space read-only memory.
Oh, that's interesting. Do
I
you
think
know,
it means that at least. I'm guessing, kind of.
do you know what VHS stands for?
Vertical house system.
Well, you're wrong. You're wrong. It actually stands for Video Home System. I had to actually Google that one. I remember back in the day, folks, when we had the VHS tapes, because we were born at that time, folks, technologically, where none of the digital stuff existed yet today. So when we were born and we were like really little kids, it was VHS tapes, and then it turned into CDs, and then it turned into everything was digital. And I remember when that came around, everyone was like, "Oh my God, look, on Bluetooth, you can just like download the stuff onto like an MP3 player." And it was like, what? That's crazy. And now that's like, standard. Like that's not even like the MP3 even looks ancient compared to what we have today, like with the cloud and all that. But
I remember the little goofy VHS tapes. Me personally, I never obviously really dealt with them that much because I was like that was right when I was like sort of at the age where VHS was kind of going out a little bit. But I remember specifically hitting the button on the VHS thing where it goes starts like winding up and stuff, and the tape starts flying, and then the thing starts going, and it starts throwing the tape. It starts throwing the tape outside. Like you remember that?
Yeah,
like
I
you
remember that.
you would overdo it or something like that. And started just like throwing the like tape out the side of the damn machine, like it go flying across the room.
Yeah, like the film would start shooting out and stuff. You'd be like, "Stop it! Stop the thing!" And then you'd have to like get out the little VHS key and like rewind it and stuff. Like
Man, I remember I ruined a nice good tape of Kipper, that kids cartoon doing that. I ruined a whole tape of Kipper.
Man, honestly, man, I'll be honest with y'all. So there was something kind of like satisfying about VHS. How you have to shove this giant brick thing into the like player, like the the VHS player, and it would go, and it would like slowly insert it in, and then you hear that of it like locking in, and then it accessing the tape, and then unraveling it, and then playing it. It was honestly like a pretty cool little system. But it's of its time, obsolete now, but it was still pretty neat, back when it was around. But anyways, moving on from that, one day, Matthew, we're gonna sound like old folks, like to kids in the future. Neuralink. Back in the day, we didn't have to pay for free thinking. Like back in the day, we had VHS tapes. But anyways, moving on from that.
Never heard of that Kipper? He's a good man.
Y'all don't know what Kipper is? Like kids are supposed to know what like was around like 80 years ago. Shit,
Yeah.
Kipper was the shit. Like
You ever heard of that penguin that went newt newt, and that one that was from the Kharg Island?
you ever heard of Saddam Hussein? That's like I bet you hear about him in class now, don't you?
Wait till you hear about Kovylinskoye.
Wait, hang on, man. This is gonna be the great one. Grandpapa? Yes, sir. What did you do during let's see, what were all the things that have happened within the past 6 years? The pandemic, the war in Ukraine, the war in Iran, the war with Venezuela, the eventual war with Cuba, so on and so forth. Why, sir, I did what every man did. I observed the situation. Like, they're gonna be like, whoa. Like, they're gonna be like, that's crazy. They're not. They're gonna be like, that's lame. And I'll be like, well,
young man, I was alive when they started betting on the outcome of the country losing the war. I was here for that when they started betting against the country on different markets. They said, when's the Ayatollah going to be taken out? And the people were placing bets on their phone.
I was alive when the president came on TV and he said, "We've won the war, we're winning the war, and we're going to win the war all at the same time." But Papa, that means Grandpapa, that means nothing. Exactly. Like it's like
Young man, I was around at the time when quantum messaging became a mainstream article.
Oh man, imagine all the goofy stuff we're gonna be able to tell grandkids in the future, like about our time alive. Like it's like, oh yeah, you wouldn't believe it. I sat there and said tens of thousands of people alive that the Strait of Hormuz was going to be an issue, and then they went to war. But didn't they do something about it? No, hell no. They just let it get blockaded. Like it's like they just like completely screwed over the oil industry. Like absolutely. But anyways,
is Babe Ruth still alive? No, he died a long time ago. Oh, that's a shame.
Oh, and then you finally get the chance to say this. Everyone I know is dead. Everybody I know, they're all gone. They're gone, I tell you. And I am waiting for my time. You know, I never knew what to say to old people who said that, by the way, folks, because they were like almost all, like everyone that we knew would say that. And it's like, I don't know how to react to that, honestly. I still don't know how to react to that. Like when someone just tells you, everybody I know is dead. I don't know anybody. It's like, well, you know me. It's like, do I not count as a person? Like, it's like, anyways, moving on from that, it is time for us to get back to the rest of our news. We got on a rabbit hole right there. But moving on down into Konstantinivka, we were able to see the Ukrainian 36th Marine Brigade conducting a little drone attack on some guys. Take a look at this right here. Oh, would you look at that? And they dodged the drone. It did hit the car, but the 36 Marines, they hung in there. And they're all good.
One day, this right here will be history book material too. The dawn of drone warfare. That's what people will be saying. It literally started in 2022 and beyond, and that was the very beginning of a very bad, nasty era of warfare.
Oh man, you know it's gonna be like that World War I chapter where they'd be like, okay, everybody, you remember how everybody used to fight in lines? So the machine gun changed that because they turned everyone into hamburger helper in like 2 minutes. It's gonna be like that. It's like, do y'all remember when machine guns would like make guys like, you know, spread out and move around a lot? So drones made it to where if you spread out and move around a lot, you all just die, you know? So then everyone stopped spreading out and moving around a lot and everyone went underground, you know? And then everyone's going, really? I'm like, really? Is that right? A whole bunch of kids are now going to give a damn about this one day in grade school. And they're going to be talking about, why doesn't school teach us something important like paying taxes? And then the reality is that if the school did try and teach them how to pay taxes, they still wouldn't pay attention. And they'd say they just find that out on their own because they're not stupid or something. But anyways, when you see them walking through here, oh, what do we got here? Oh, they're running back. See them all starting to run back. And trying to get into shelter here before a drone comes and gets them. And moving on from that clip and on out of the Konstantinivka area, we are now going to be moving on up to Kyiv to cover the speech from the President of Ukraine, President Volodymyr Zelensky. And so, without further ado, here is the speech. Speech.
Українці, українки, коротко про сьогодні провів селектор по всім регіонам, де були російські удари і влучання. Особлива увага Чернігівщині, там весь день йшли роботи по відновленню електрики. Я доручив урядовцям та команді Офісу президента також пропрацювати разом з нашими військовими питання протиповітряної оборони, зокрема захисту від дронів у західних регіонах України. Треба додати рубежів захисту – це чітке завдання. Ми знаємо також, що росіяни готують на найближчі місяці операцію проти систем водопостачання. В кожній громаді має бути серйозне ставлення, абсолютно відповідальне ставлення до захисту відповідних об'єктів. Ще раз сьогодні пройшлися з прем'єр-міністром України та керівником Нафтогазу, іншими урядовцями та міністром оборони України по ключових завданнях. Повітряні сили, Збройні сили України теж мають що зробити. Активно працює наша дипломатична команда. Зокрема, ми говоримо з країнами Близького Сходу та Затоки, які зараз мають надзвичайний інтерес до українського досвіду, захисту від дронів передусім. Вже бачимо, що не тільки шахеди б'ють там на Близькому Сході та в Затоці, але і все більше фактів про застосування FPV-дронів. Це сучасна війна, до якої треба бути готовими. Україна має цю експертизу. Ми не потребуємо взамін на нашу підтримку відповідної підтримки у тому, з чим нам тут дійсно складно, і це і захист проти балістики, і фінансові ресурси на оборону. Україна пропонує взаємовигідне партнерство. Ми можемо посилити тих, хто може посилити нас. І зараз ситуація в світі така, що тільки скоординовані та спільні дії можуть гарантувати справжні результати і справжню безпеку. Ми бачимо, що в Європі нас блокують, і поки цей ризик є, нам треба шукати додаткові можливості посилення. Близький Схід і Затока – це перспектива, правильна перспектива, на наш погляд. Ми і серйозні можливості посилити нас. Також детально працюємо з нашими надійними партнерами в Європі для масштабування спільних проєктів з виробництва зброї. Передусім, це дрони. Я вдячний кожній країні та кожному лідеру, які вже з нами. Будуть ще нові домовленості, ми їх готуємо. І, звісно, вдячність нашим воїнам. Наші позиції на фронті, наші позиції у вітчизняному виробництві, наша сила тут, вдома. Саме це дозволяє Україні привертати глобальну увагу. Без глобальної уваги майже неможливо вистояти в такій війні. А без сильного захисту світ не помічає народи, які б'ються за свободу. Саме тому наша сміливість, наша сила – це найголовніший український актив. Захищаємо нашу державу, захищаємо нашу незалежність, досягаємо результатів для України. Слава Україні!
Героям слава!
And with that, that is the end of the speech from the President of Ukraine, President Volodymyr Zelensky, here on this day of 1,491 of our news coverage. I've got to be honest with you, Matthew, that number is kind of getting very unrealistic because we're not getting that much farther away at this point now from 2,000, which is really wild because it felt like we really did something when we hit 1,000, and we're now almost 500 days away from day 1,000. Which means that 33% of the channel's existence has come after day 1,000, which is really weird to think about. But outside of that, though, folks, it is time for us to get on into the second segment of the stream where we get to talk to each and every single one of y'all. And we get to talk about anything and everything except for religion, politics, climate change, and whether the A-10 is relevant in modern warfare or not. But before we get to all of that, we have one last thing that we must cover. Russia has stated a little bit of news that one piece of news I forgot to cover today, which was that the Russians are claiming that the military exercise between South Korea and the United States near to the Korean DMZ, which is the Freedom Shield, is apparently a preparation for war, according to the Russian Foreign Ministry. Now, what kind of BS are they trying to sell? But Matthew, what are people thinking about that? What are you thinking about that as well?
Okay, so Russia is saying that the U.S. military drills, which are apparently ongoing near North Korea, which are pretty large, are a preparation for war, they say. So how will this unfold? 64% said it's just the usual saber rattling, while 23% said war in Asia is likely imminent, and 6% said, small skirmishes might happen, possibly so. So at the same time, I will say this. There are some bad signs coming out of Asia right now. If y'all haven't heard, Japan just deployed or said they're going to deploy about 1,000 troops down to the Philippines for some military exercises, which is unprecedented, by the way. That hasn't happened in a very, very long time. Also, the Philippines is saying they're going to rethink their security relationship with China, and they failed to specify what that means. We're also seeing North Korea aggress towards South Korea and make wild statements and also do pretty large missile tests as well. We even saw a Cobra ball aircraft lurking around South Korea the other day trying to look out for possible North Korean missile launches. So that's pretty rough as well. So overall, and also don't forget Taiwan as well. That's still an ongoing situation that never stopped. So Asia is still a bit of a, what you call a matchbox at this point. It could go up at any point, and who knows what it's going to be. But I like Aurora 93 just said in the chat, war is contagious, and the mindset is contagious. It really is. It's not a myth. Once countries start going into war on a large scale, like we see pretty much around the world, everybody else thinks, hey, this might be a good time because those other countries are distracted with these other wars. We can do this and nobody's even going to notice. That's what they start to think. So I think that we could see something happen, but it's too early to say that it's imminent. But Enforcer, what say you?
I think it's just usual saber rattling. I'd be with the 64%. This has been done every year at the same time for decades. And I think that's just the Russians trying to come up with stuff to say and fling around at this point. So I don't put too much stock into it, but it is still interesting that they would say that. To say the least. So I hope that does address it the best I can. But I want to get on into something that is deeply fascinating me, folks. And it's the question, which many people responded to, where I asked y'all in the middle of Zelensky's speech, I said, do y'all remember when the street lights used to glow yellow instead of white? And let me go pull that up. Street lights then versus now. Let me show y'all this because I find this interesting, and I think that this is something that we need to return to. We need to return back to the yellow glow because I do not like the white harshness of the LEDs. And I remember that back when we were kids, all the lights used to glow yellow instead of white. And that's because they were, I believe, normal filament lights instead of LEDs. And LEDs are a lot cheaper. But also at the same time, it's like, an LED doesn't have to be this stark, harsh white. You can get LEDs that do give off that yellowish color. And I would generally like to see that back. You know, me personally, I think it would look a lot better. What do you think, Matthew?
Yeah, it could be good right there. But also in the meantime, though, I have some breaking news. It
Oh,
looks like Russian media reacted to that video that the White House had put out, showing some female voice in the video saying something about it's launching, right? Or something like that. Apparently Russia reacted. And they put this in an RT post. They said White House mistakenly posts nuke launching soon question mark. What the F are you tweeting? So the Russians are taking it a step further and trying to make it sound like it's some type of nuclear launch threat or something like that. Which honestly, I mean, if you interpret it to the extreme, I could see a possible interpretation like that because they said something about launching soon or something like that. And who the hell knows what that means? That's why it's really stupid to post stuff like that because you never know who's going to take that to mean something it might not mean. Really, folks, I'll say this: if the White House did that intentionally, that is reckless beyond belief to post something like that intentionally, with it being very ambiguous and vague like that. This is not a game. These are powers with nukes that could potentially misinterpret something. Maybe it was unintentional. Maybe that's why they deleted that one clip. But whatever the case is, pretty stupid to say the least.
I would have to definitely agree. Also, by the way, Matthew, I'm going to restart Discord really quickly because it sounds like it's having a little bit of an issue at the moment. So let me see about restarting that here really quickly while we're on air. But I definitely have to agree, folks, with Enforcer Matt on that. That is a pretty significant thing to not kid around about and make things as ambiguous as possible, because we're not trying to release a brand new crypto coin, fellas. Like, that's not what we're trying to do. We're trying to, generally run the country. And I got to be honest with y'all, the social media crap that they're doing these days is getting stupid to the point that it could create unnecessary escalations. But Enforcer Matt should be back with us now. Matthew, are you back?
Yeah, I'm back right now. But yeah, I think it's really goofy, whatever the case was. And also they said sound on, like in the video. So to me, that suggests it was likely something intentional. Maybe they deleted it because they realized it kind of had a stupid look to it, possibly. Maybe they deleted it for that reason. Or maybe it was an accidental post. But the whole accidental idea, I don't really see much merit in it being accidental, because why'd they put sound on and all the captions on it? That seems crazy. And also, why'd they post it to so many different platforms? I think it got posted to Instagram, and I can't remember the other ones it got posted to, but I don't understand, like, whatever teenagers they got or whoever they got running their social media accounts, they need to replace them because the idiots that they're hiring to do their messaging is pretty dumb.
Also, someone said a White House just waited a minute and find out. Yeah, but that's not how they're supposed to run, though, because I think the way you're wording that makes it sound like you're kind of supporting it. That's not how you run a government, though. You announce things when they're happening. You don't sit here and allude to stuff like something big's coming. It's like, we're not releasing the McRib here. We're running the United States of America's government, the federal government. So it runs a little bit differently. Runs a lot differently. That's generally why no one else has ever done this before, is because it's stupid and it can lead to unnecessary misunderstandings globally, because it's so ambiguous. Anyone could take that to mean literally anything. Like, while the Russians would go and run with stuff to the hills, I mean, you give these people the room to run to the hills because you make it so ambiguous that they can think anything that they want and generally run with it. So, that's what I'd have to say on that. That's my 2 cents. That was a stupid post to make, and now everyone's reacting to it about as stupidly as possible, which is about what we were expecting at the beginning of the show. We didn't say that to all of y'all because we actually knew about those before we went live on air, but we were like, this is absolutely stupid, like the stupidity of this sort of stuff, and it's going to end up getting us in a pretty bad lurch, because, and I gotta say, folks, a lot of people are like, well, that's so stupid. I mean, they can do whatever they want. I remember back in the day, folks, there was this thing, I think it was called the Affordable Health Care Act, and everyone in this country acted outraged because nobody was actually able to read the bill before they passed it, if I remember correctly from back then, and that was a whole thing about, well, we want to read it before we pass it, and everyone's like, that's outrageous. The government should let everyone know what's going on and let them read it. And now, like, with the White House, oh, it's completely understandable that they're ambiguous as hell. We don't want to really understand what our government's doing or what they mean by that. We just want them to do shit and us not understand it. It's like, that's not really transparent, at least to me. But anyways, With that, I hope that does address it the best I can, in my opinion. That's just my 2 cents on the matter. And someone's about to call us political for saying that there ought to be certain standards that are kept within, all administrations across the board. I'm sorry. I mean, if you love the guy so much, you're not willing to, say that some stuff is just goofy when it's goofy. I mean, that's on you, not me. Sorry. But anyways, it is time for us to move on into them questions. But before we do, I do have to get back to this one last thing. The thing that I was on a little while ago. The yellow street lights. It just looked better.
Yeah, I guess so.
He guesses. Matthew, you remember when we were live? I mean, look at that. That orange glow versus that stark whiteness that doesn't give soul. It's sad, really. It's sad. But anyways, it's time for us to get on into some questions. So, Matthew, what do we got?
All right, so jumping into our Super Chat questions once again, our first one of the last segment is going to go to none other than Chris Feilbach. And thank you very much, Chris, for that $50 support, and we do appreciate that. He said today's orb word is Borgordimus. It's the name of the sound your intestines make when food is moving through them, and when you're hungry. There's truly an orb word for everything. And I gotta tell you, I'm familiar with that sound right there, because I always have the very unfortunate, or I used to at least, the very unfortunate circumstance of any time I would go and take like an exam, like at college or law school or something like that, and it would be dead silent in the room. Instantly, my stomach would start going, meow, meow. I'll be like, oh my God, are you kidding me? And it would be so loud that it would literally, like, you would hear it across the room. I'd be like, why does it start happening every single time I go in here to take an exam? It starts doing this. I'm like, I guess maybe it was like nerves or something, but I guess also possibly being hungry as well, because I'd only have like a banana or something like that for breakfast. But it's obnoxious. I know about that. But Enforcer, what say you?
And I gotta say that it is quite obnoxious. I haven't personally had that happen at the moments that Matthew's had that happen. My guts generally are very, very stealthy. They're very quiet. They generally don't make a lot of noise. Rarely they do, but that's very, very rare. But outside of that, I thank you for sharing another orb word of the day, Chris. And I gotta say, you're really doing some digging to find these things, and we appreciate that greatly. And we also greatly appreciate your support, which helps us to keep this channel running and make this thing a reality. And so a huge thanks to you so much once again. I hope that does address that well. And with that, we're on to the next one.
And we also have a 50 from Carlos Santiago, who did not leave a comment, though. But thank you very much, Carlos, for that $50 support. And we do appreciate it. Very, very generous support and helping to keep the channel running. And Enforcer, what say you?
And I gotta thank you massively for the support. I thank you. You didn't throw in a comment, but we're still greatly appreciative of your support, which helps us to make loads of comments on air, and it helps us to be able to pay our bills and keep this show running every day of the week. And we're greatly appreciative of that. I mean, massively appreciative of that. You don't even know. We're hugely appreciative. We thank yous. We thank yous greatly. And so a big thanks to you so much once again. I hope that does address that incredibly well. And with that, it is time for us to move on and into the next one.
We also have a $50 support from none other than Old Warrior Fella. And thank you very much, Old Warrior, for that 50 as well. He said, commenters are saying that video of the F-18 was seen without the smoke puff Sunday or so, and maybe earlier. And I do remember a video of one, but not the framing, and this would be an interesting comparison.
Generally, I'd heard those as well, but the reason why we actually ran with the footage and showed it on air is because I did go back and look at it, and it is a separate clip. Gun runs look very similar. They take generally the same angle of attack to gun down their target, and then they generally peel off the same way. So they'll end up looking pretty similar because the approach and also the peeling off is very identical in almost every single instance of that, but it is a different clip. That is one thing that we were able to confirm. And so a big thanks to you for support and helping this channel to keep it running, Old Warrior Fella. And we thank you massively for being here with us tonight and helping this channel to keep on running, because if it wasn't for folks like you, we wouldn't be able to make this thing possible and keep it running. And so a big thanks to you so much once again. I hope that does address that incredibly well. And with that, it is time for us to move on and into the next one.
Also, by the way, someone brought up an interesting point I want to address in the chat real quick. That it's a factual thing. Someone said, "Are you too concerned with our UFO peeps just disappearing randomly in the United States?" I will admit it's a little bit concerning. I heard that they labeled one of the disappearances of a former defense official who apparently was involved with tracking UFOs or something like that. They labeled that a national security threat, and they don't know where he went. They don't know what happened to him or anything. He just disappeared. And also, y'all might have not heard this either, but a lot of top scientists in the United States have also met unfortunate demises. Like, for example, they go to their apartment, all of a sudden they'll be found dead on the floor or something like that. And they'll be working on things like, for example, space propulsion or technologies like that. And all of a sudden they wind up dead. And then some of them have been ruled homicides. Some of them have, which is very odd. It's like, who's coming after scientists? It's a kind of a weird thing. But I don't know about the guy, though. I know who you're talking about. Sadly, I don't know his name right off the top of my head, but I know about him. But Enforcer, have you heard about that?
I haven't really been hearing about that a lot. I hear about it every once in a while. And, and the usual conspiracy theories come around. It's the big oil companies or something like that, but I don't really know a lot about it at the moment, sadly.
I was thinking foreign adversaries is what I was thinking. When I heard that, and then also, they have no leads apparently. I was thinking, I was like, who would want to get their hands on somebody with a bunch of classified information like that? Probably a foreign adversary if they get their hands on them. And also, someone said he was a general. I think he might have been a general. I can't remember for certain what he was, but he definitely wasn't just like some random dude. He was definitely somebody of importance. So I don't know how to explain it.
Yeah, it is really weird. It is really weird. It makes you wonder, Matthew, would they come for us?
No, we're not that important.
And also, we're kind of stupid. I mean, like, we're not smart like those guys. Those guys know, like, nuclear physics and stuff, and other important stuff. Like, we're just a couple of dudes bebopping around on YouTube. We're not that important, fellas. We're not that important. So, luckily, we're not on the list. But outside of that, well, we're on other people's lists.
So here, So here it is right here. It says FBI, and also now the FBI's gotten involved in it. That's news to me. That was on March the 12th. The FBI got involved in the search for the retired Air Force Major General missing for 2 weeks. And the guy's name is retired Air Force Major General William Neal McCasland. He was 68 years old. And they claim in the article that he left his Albuquerque home on foot on February the 27th and hasn't been in contact with family or friends since. That's what they say. But, the FBI is now involved in it and stuff. And apparently the guy was involved with researching, I think, UFOs or something like that, possibly in the military. So, seems a bit odd. Hopefully the guy's all right, whatever happened to him, but sounds odd.
Yeah, I'd have to say, I mean, it is rather odd. I mean, but then again, the guy could have just, wandered off and just, died, that could have happened. But it is always weird how a lot of those folks just end up, just randomly dying. Like like a lot of them die like hamsters, basically. They just die in the weirdest of circumstances. And it's like, well, these people are fairly academically smart. I would doubt that would happen to all of them all the time. So, a little interesting with that. I see.
Yeah, get this. It says he served as chief engineer of the Department of Defense's Global Positioning System Program, the system program director of the Space-Based Laser Project Office, and director of special programs of the Pentagon. He also commanded the Air Force Research Laboratory at Wright-Patterson. So, I mean, this guy's definitely not just some random bloke in the Air Force. This dude here is highly important, to say the least. And also, I don't think the dude was like, getting. He's only 68. It's not like he was like 90 or something like that. So, I mean, that's probably why the FBI is involved. This guy clearly was a high-ranking guy, and he had a lot of connections with some very high-profile programs in the military.
Yeah, it's interesting there. I wonder what happened to the guy. Well, quite a mystery here. Quite a mystery. If he lived in Salt Lake City, though, that wouldn't have happened, because Salt Lake City is truly the safest place on Earth.
I mean, Albuquerque is not too bad.
Wait a minute. Albuquerque?
Yeah.
Bro, Albuquerque's like, not the greatest.
You know why they call it Albuquerque?
Albuquerque? Bro, it's Albuquerque, dude.
They call it just a little quirky. That's what they call it. That.
Oh, man, that was a pretty good one. What the hell is this out here? Oh, look, they just built all of these roads for no reason, really. What does that look like? Huh. That's odd. It's just roads for no reason, really. A lot of them, too. I mean, look how many there are out here.
That's a lot of roads out there. You could get lost.
Could get lost. You could. Let me go pull this up. Let me go pull up that Albuquerque Let's see. Crime rate. Let's see. Oh my God. Albuquerque has historically experienced high crime rates compared to the national average. It's on a downward trend, but it's still one of the most dangerous cities in America. So, probably not the best place to
Yeah.
just go out of your house and go on a walk,
Yeah, but I mean, he wasn't like a pipsqueak or something like that. This dude was a major general in the Air Force.
He's
I know the Air Force
68.
isn't known for like. Yeah, but I mean, I think he took a pistol with him. They said, like, let me go check the article real quick. I think they say he took, like the 38 or something was missing from the drawer or something like that when he left. Let me go back and take a look though, and make sure about that. Let's see here. Let me go down and take a peek. They had some more information. It said this is in the CNN article. It said his phone, prescription glasses, and wearable devices were left behind at the house, and investigators believe his hiking boots, wallet, and a 38 revolver with a holster are missing. So I mean, he wasn't just like it's like a pushover or something like that. It sounds like he left with the cap.
I mean, but he left everything else behind. I mean, that sounds like something a little bit odd that he did, because if you leave everything behind but some hiking boots and a gun, I think we can get an idea that that guy, I think, might have wandered off to go and, finish things more so, and also I saw Wrath of Cat say it in the chat, kind of what I'm trying to say, but not say it directly. But that sounds like that was generally something of a grander plan. Like they're probably going to find him out there somewhere, 38 in hand, and generally the story will tell itself after that point. That sounds like that might be what that's about.
I hope not.
No, I mean, I would hope not, but I mean, that kind of sounds like what it is, because I mean, he doesn't take a phone with him, so he can't be located. Because they can't ping his phone or anything to even try and find him. He doesn't bring his glasses. He doesn't bring anything, like except for boots to go somewhere off far away, maybe off in the middle of nowhere, and a gun. And those two things seem to add up to me to give an indication that this guy has disappeared due to his own designs, probably.
Hopefully that's not the case right there. But also, by the way, I also looked up the other thing as well. There were some articles here. Let's see here. Yeah, here's the guy right here. The MIT's plasma science and fusion professor and director, the fellow there I was talking about. Apparently, he died at 47. That's one of the guys right there I was mentioning earlier. He died from a gunshot wound that he sustained hours before he was found, according to the article. And he was a top nuclear science and engineering guy, director, and professor that was just, shot just out of the blue. And he was one of 6 people of these top scientists that were just either found dead or they went missing, one or the other. And it was around the same time where that Air Force fella went missing too.
That is interesting. I don't know what to make of it, but that one sounds, and I see some people saying, well, maybe they made it look like that. Maybe they did, whoever's trying to do this. But at the same time, though, I mean, like we do have to remember, folks, that people who kind of seem to go out on their own terms, generally there's really no indicator that they're going to do that. They just do it one day. That's why it's always a shock to everyone. They're like, oh, well, the guy seemed, happy and fine and everything. There was nothing really wrong with him. Why in the world would he do that? Well, I mean, all of them look like that generally. I mean, there's really no way to even tell them apart from anyone else. They seem totally fine until they go and do what they do to themselves. And I'm not saying that happened to all of them, but at least with that guy, it's like, I mean, that sounds a lot like that's adding up to me. It sounds like when dogs know that they're about to die, and this is actually an interesting fact about dogs, and I think this kind of translates over to this. When dogs know that they're about to die, they generally try and get as far away as possible from the people that they know, and they want to go die somewhere where they'll never be found, or at least their body won't be found. So that way, the folks that they love and know, like the people that take care of them, won't know that they died. That's why whenever a dog's about to die, you always find them in a weird spot. And someone who has a mental thought like that, they could have put on their hiking boots and thought, I'm just going to wander off into the desert somewhere, maybe up into this mountain range over here if it's around here, and, do what I'm going to do, and no one will find me for a while. So, that'll be that. And that could have been his line of thinking, or, it could have been something else entirely different. But that's kind of seeming to line up to me.
Well, these foreign intelligence services, if they want to get you, they can. That's the unfortunate truth to it. There's ways that they operate, and they even operate here on U.S. soil as well. for the most part. So you always got to be careful. But ultimately, though, if you have, like, for example, like, a country coming after you or something like that, with a lot of resources and they have a bunch of intelligence assets and stuff like that, they can find ways to, like, make it look like a certain way, or, to make a person go missing and there's no trace. There's ways that can be done by these foreign groups and stuff like that. So, like, for us, we're obviously not that important as, like, like an MIT director of physics or something like that, or like a major general in the Air Force. But, we obviously protect ourselves and think about security. But ultimately, though, if someone really wants to get you, like, they can make it look like anything. Like, they can unlock your door and then lock it back from the outside somehow and make it look like nobody even entered your home for the most part. Like, it's really horrifying how, like, good some of these agencies are with that type of stuff. I've heard stories about, things like that happening. I'm like, wow, that's kind of horrifying, actually. You have to pretty much be on your toes 24/7 if you're actually being hunted by a foreign country like that, which is not a good position to be in.
They went and killed the guy in Abu Dhabi.
And then they locked the door from the outside.
like I know which one you're talking
You
about.
heard that story?
Yeah,
You
I heard that story.
by
Yeah,
the
I
way?
have. Yeah.
Yeah, I have no idea how they do that. Like, the story went like this. It was in a condo in the Middle East. Some foreign intelligence service carried out a hit on some guy. I won't say which one it was, but some hit was carried out on a guy that was in his condo, and somehow the intelligence service that went and hit the guy and took him out, they were able to lock the door from the outside somehow, and there was no real way to do that, but somehow they were able to lock it from the outside and make it look like the guy was in his house, never left it, and simply just died inside the house, just from natural causes, basically. And nobody could ever really figure out what happened to the guy. They said, oh, well, he's dead, and that's the end of it, and nobody really ever figured it out.
Well, sorry, they locked the door of his condo from the outside?
That's what they say.
Well, what if they just had a copy of the guy's key and they just locked it when they left?
I mean, that's possible, but I think the catch was there was no way to do that from the outside with the deadbolt, I think.
Huh. I'd have to
Also,
look
how they
into
copy
that.
his key on the spot like that?
Well, I mean, like they might have just been able to take a picture of it, have someone make a duplicate somewhere else and then bring it with them. And then when they were done, they went and locked the door or something. It's not out of the question. I mean, there's certainly a way they do it. There's always a process to magic. It's never just magic to be magic for the sake of it. So there's a way that they did it. I'm sure that if we went and looked at the door in question, I'm sure we could finagle or think of some way to do it, or come up with a little thingamajig that might be able to do it. But I'm sure it's not out of the realm of possibility. I mean, it's certainly doable if they did.
I heard they teleported in.
Transporter room. Send me to this man's house. And they just like appear in his room. Oh no! Choke that man. And take him out.
Bring me in, Captain.
Captain, I'm giving her all she's got. Damn it, Scotty. We need the whole hit team in his bedroom.
Damn, Scotty's in there strangling somebody in their condo. I'm giving her all she's got, Captain.
The guy's eyes are popping out of his head. I'm giving her all she's got, Captain. She's still hanging on.
Oh my God, that's horrible. That's bad.
Oh man, I tell you. Oh man, but that's some ridiculousness right there. But beyond that though, I've heard that Albuquerque isn't really the greatest place. I don't know. People from New Mexico, let us know. I saw some people saying that apparently it's like tweaker hell, and I've heard the same thing about Tucson and Arizona from someone who lived there recently, and they actually moved out because it was really, really bad. But I've heard that New Mexico is actually a fairly interesting place, but really more so when you're in the northern part of the state. Instead of the southern part. I've heard that the southern part's meh, but I've heard that the northern part's really nice because you have these beautiful forests and national and state parks like this, which kind of reminds me a lot of Utah, honestly, at least from where we're at right now.
Yeah, a little bit.
But let us know, folks. I'd be interested to hear from our folks out there in New Mexico. But anyways, what? Touch Me Not Mountain.
That's always a good rule. Don't do that.
Man, this mountain, when you go to it, so why are you called that? They did unspeakable things to me. And it's oh shit. It's get off this mountain. Oh my God. Well, look at that. There it is.
Man, I heard that they transferred him from the pen in New York to
Fort Dix.
Yeah, they transferred him to Fort Dix. It's like, what the dude? The irony behind that. My God.
Man, I'm not gonna lie, man. I mean, like when he heard that name, I'm sure he was smiling. Like he's like, "Oh, boy, ain't nothing like a diddy party." It's like, man, it's like, man, he's about to turn into that guy from that one episode of the Boondocks. He's gonna be in there going, "Now listen, some people call you Chris Hansen. I call you Chris Handsome. Now we can do this the easy way, or we can do this the hard way. The choice is yours." It's like, man, I'd be like, hell no, get me out of here, man. Like, I'd be scared as hell of hearing that he was getting transferred there. Honestly, if anyone told me that I was going to prison at Fort Dix, I would honestly think that was a joke. I'd be like, that's not even a real place. Believe it or not, folks, it's real, but it's not spelled in the way you would think. It's actually spelled this way. There it is. This is Fort Dix, spelled D-I-X, not the other way that a lot of y'all are probably thinking about. And it's in the middle of New Jersey, which isn't really that far from where he was at previously anyways. I mean, it wasn't that far. So, it's kind of in the same locale. And it's also near the McGuire Air Force Base, so he's like right on he's in an Air Force Base, basically. Here it is. The Federal Correction Institute of Fort Dix. So this is the place he's in, right here.
That's it.
That's it. Well, anyways, it's time for us to move on and into the next question.
And our next super chat goes to Pretzel's Garage, who puts in a 50. And thank you very much, Pretzel, for that $50 support. They said, for the Enforcer, we lost another SP tunnel motor from the Trona Railway today. And unfortunately, the last two are planned for the chopping block as well. And here's a 50 for the train fund in LSA.
And thank you so much for the support to that train fund. And that is actually a tragedy. There's actually an SP tunnel motor that's still running on the Alabama-Tennessee River Railway, crazily enough, in Alabama. But it's a shame, those tunnel motors were special, and they don't make them like that anymore. They never will, actually. And it's so sad to see that they're all kind of going. But I thank you so much for the train fund. And also, by the way, folks, I've got big news. The big boy, which is big. Big boy, let me pull up Big Boy 4014 here really quickly. It's coming to Salt.
Also keep in mind, we got a lot of super chats to get to, by the way, just to keep that in mind.
Oh, Matthew, I'm sure it's not that many. What is it, 70?
It's a pretty good number, just to keep the pacing right.
Matthew's just saying that to try and get us through the train segment quickly, but it's coming to Salt Lake City on the 2nd of April, and it's going to be in downtown. How sick is that? That is sick. So I cannot wait for this. I'm definitely going down there. I don't know about Matthew, but I'm definitely going down there, and I'm taking a look at this thing. This is going to be, I think, at the Amtrak platform that day from 2 to 5.
Tell you what, man, that wasn't good for OPSEC to say that.
What?
To say you're going down there on the days that it's going to show up, I wouldn't have said that.
Well, I mean, everyone knows we don't live in downtown Salt Lake. I mean, we've said that millions of times.
Are you saying where you're going to be at a certain time?
I'm going to be amongst the crowd.
Somebody can look for you.
Well, they better be looking good, because hardly anybody knows what we looking like. Beyond that, though, I'm going to be down there at some point, because this thing is just fantastic looking. I mean, look at that thing. I'm definitely putting this on the Patreon, if I'm able to get some pictures of it. It's really cool. But with that, I hope that does address that the best I can, at least in my opinion. And with that, it is time for us to move on and into the next one.
And, the next one here is going to go to none other than Arar983, who put in a 20. And thank you very much, Arar, for that $20 support. And he said, y'all predicted Iran's denial of the peace deal and their denial to even talk, apparently, and saved me a ton of stunk money in LSA.
And thank you so much for the support. And we're always happy to tell people accurate news so that way they know what really is going on. And so big thanks to you so much once again. I hope that does address that well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And the next one goes to Mary, who puts in a 20. And thank you very much, Mary, as well for the support. They said, we're usually ahead strategically. So what are we not seeing? And is this pause actually part of a larger plan, force positioning, intelligence gathering, coalition building, rather than hesitation?
I generally have to say we're not really ahead of the whole plan inside of things here, sadly, and there's just really no way to formulate it to where it would be. So with that, a big thanks to you for support and helping this channel to keep on running, because if it wasn't for folks like you, we wouldn't be able to make this thing possible, and we wouldn't be able to keep it running. Also, by the way, folks, so a lot of people are like, well, some people know your face. It's okay, because I'm actually going to show up and I'm going to look like this when I go and look at it, so no one's going to know who I am, because I'm going to have a balaclava on. I'm going to have a little shiesty on.
Then they're gonna think you're robbing the train. Then the cops are gonna have a word with you.
No, I'll just say it's for like I'm a germaphobe or something. I don't want to catch like a sickness or something. That's what I'll say. It'll be fine. It'll be fine. I'm sure of it. I'm sure. I mean, everyone else there will be wearing a shiesty. I'm sure. Rail fans are like that, But but anyway, so that we're on the next one.
Man, it's gonna be like an old reenactment. Yeah, the old reenacting and stuff like that. We're gonna show what they're gonna show a train robbery. It's like we don't want to see that type of reenactment. That will have to pass on that one. But our next one here goes to Snarmageddon, who puts in a 20, and thank you very much for that support. I said GWOT Marine here, and if Marines put boots on ground, the IRGC is gonna wish we went back to just airstrikes.
I hope so. And a big thanks to you for support. And also, really cool to hear that you were in the war on terror. And a big thanks to you so much once again for support and helping this channel to keep it running. And with that, we're on the next one.
We also have a 20 from DWRB, and thank you very much for that support, good sir. He said, was not expecting a Boondocks reference tonight. And regarding Iran's nukes, do you think the absence of evidence is not evidence of absence? Say what? LSA.
Thank you so much for the support, and I'd have to say, I had to do the Boondocks reference. The Boondocks is very quotable. And Matthew, do you know what that is?
Not really, no.
It's an animated series of silly shenanigans, and I would highly recommend that you take a look at it. It's a very interesting and honestly hilarious show. But outside of that, though, I would say that generally there is a decent amount of evidence in Iran, and also the fact, like, even if there wasn't any evidence, if the Iranians say we're not making a nuclear weapon, and then we say, okay, well, can you sign this piece of paper that says that you agree to not develop a nuclear weapon, and you're not going to be working towards that, and we'll be allowed to come into your country and check around every once in a while just to make sure that you're not making one, and then they say no. That's generally enough evidence as it is. That is what we would generally call a reasonable, articulate suspicion that they are working on creating a nuclear weapon, because if they weren't, why in the world would they have a problem just not signing that? Just signing that instead of not signing it, and that's really where the issue came in, at least on that point. So a big thanks to you for the support and helping this channel to keep it running, and I hope that does address that incredibly well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And our next super chat goes to Music Uploader, who puts in a 20. And thank you very much, Music, for that support. They said they blur the videos because the IRGC's been going door to door arresting people that have Starlink and executing them for espionage. And anyways, LSA, and keep up the good work as always.
It's been rather unfortunate, and I do thank you for the support and helping this channel to keep it running. And with that, we're on the next one.
We also have a 20 from Chris Feilbach, and thank you very much, Chris, for the 20. And he said, back in my day, the orbit judgment was just a meme.
Back in my day, back then, I'm starting to sound like the former president. Jack, back in the day, way back when, Corn Pop was a bad dude, and he
he's
ran.
Not like that guy that was doing that. He sounded like the guy that was trying to rap on television in Alabama. That was like, years ago they tried to put me
years
in
ago.
Years ago they tried to. It's like this live. It's like, yes, it's live, and it will never be forgotten.
Man, and it never was. But beyond that, I gotta thank you so much for the support. Double this channel to keep on running. And with that, we're on the next one.
We also have a 20 from Arar983, and thank you very much, Arar, for that $20 support. And he said, Chick-fil-A fun, because I'm at Chick-fil-A at 9 p.m., and it's never too late for chicken, LSA.
I gotta thank you so much for the support, and I'd agree. It's never too late for a nice piece of chicken. And a big thanks to you once again for support and helping the channel to keep it running. And with that, we're on the next one.
Also, Mark L said, you want to read from your book? It's
yeah.
Like, oh my goodness. Oh man, honestly, the dude should have been like, let me read from the book to begin with, instead of like trying to do this on the spot like this. Like, this isn't going to go well. But anyways, though, our next one goes to John57, who puts in a 12. He said, peace.
And peace to you as well. A big thanks to you for the support. And with that, we're on to the next one.
And we also have a $11 super chat from Bilda Beretta, and thank you very much for that 11. They said, in Vietnam, 3 million Western aligned troops, superior firepower, and 20 years on the ground, 8 for the U.S. They had less troops, tech, leverage, and extremism than Iran. And any reason this goes better?
Well, the reason why this goes better is because if you're counting all those guys, I mean, they really don't count, you see, because the French got literally strategically defeated at the Battle of Dien Bien Phu in 1954, so they don't really count because they were legitimately defeated. Now, when we were there, over the 8 years that we were there, technically we were winning. And if you ask any Vietnam veteran from back then, a lot of them would say that if we had stayed there for a couple of years longer, we probably would have won, and we probably would have been able to manage a situation like North and South Korea, where South Vietnam would still be a country to this day. But because of the lack of political willpower in this country at the time to continue the war on both ends, it had to end, and that's why it did end. So this one would go a little bit better because we're not on the ground inside of Iran, at least now, and I hope that we don't. And also, on top of that, we're not trying to support an existent government that's within the country right now either. Generally meaning that there is no questionability. Generally, anyone who's firing at U.S. forces is generally an enemy combatant at that point, and we don't have to try and get into reads about who it is and why. But big thanks to you for your support and helping this channel to keep it running. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And we also have a super chat from FPS Nolan, who put in a 10. Thank you very much for that support. They said, super weird video posted by the White House on X. Probably will be deleted soon. And Lady in Weird Metal Boots asking, it's launching soon, right? And yeah, they did delete that one. That one was deleted, apparently, from what I could tell. And they left the other one up about the U.S. flag that was like suddenly flashed in a video. And like also there's like a notification sound in it. Just very odd messaging, to say the least. Also, y'all might recall that they blamed a junior staffer for putting out that announcement claiming that the Strait of Hormuz was reopened or something. Well, like, do you remember that right there, that whole situation?
I don't really remember that. There's so many shenanigans like that happen these days, I can hardly remember them.
Yeah, but the trend is, it's like they blame like junior staffers when something doesn't go over well with the public. They're like, oh, a junior staffer did that. It's like, it's like, hopefully nobody's getting like the short end of the stick like when it comes to taking the blame for something like that. But, they might end up saying something like that about the video, but that kind of stuff's just lame, really lame. But Enforcer, what say you?
I'd have to say that we did cover them, but honestly, like the White House's social media feed, and I'll be honest, the social media feed of everyone who's involved in the executive branch right now is basically just slop and stupidity. I gotta be honest with y'all, this is one that's been on my mind for a minute. I just gotta be frank with y'all. That whole thing that the White House put out about the Wii Sports thing where they were bombing Iran, it's like, that's not really that funny considering that at that point, 8 U.S. soldiers were already dead when they put out that meme. And it's like, it's fine to meme about stuff when people aren't dying, but when people that are under the command of the President of the United States are dying in a war, it's probably not best to go put out memes that basically trivialize the entire conflict and make it seem like it's not that big of a thing and it's actually comical. Because, it's like, is it comical to the families that have the soldiers coming up to their front door telling them that their sons and daughters have just died in the service of the Republic overseas in this war? And then when they open up their phone, they see the White House putting out a Wii Sports meme on it. Does that really seem appropriate? And the answer is no. Like, we joke around here on this channel because we're not the President of the United States and we're not involved in the government. But if we're involved in the government and we have any say in anything, you're not going to see me cracking any jokes, especially when American lives have been lost in the war, no matter how justified it is. So that would be my honest 2 cents on that. Not really a good thing. I see, let's see, someone said, you're Charmin Ultra Soft today. It's not about me. For a second here, for folks who were saying that, think about the families that just got told their son died and he's dead and he's coming home in a box and he's going to have he's going to have all of this blood pumped out of his body. He's going to have fluids pumped in it so that way they might have an open casket, and they're about to go have that in a couple of days. And then when they open up their phone, the commander-in-chief of the armed forces official account for the White House puts out a Wii Sports meme about the war. Does that really seem appropriate if you were in their shoes? And that's the kind of shoes that I'm considering here. Not mine, it's theirs. And that seems wildly inappropriate given the circumstance. Because, like, you know, regardless of whoever it is, I mean, like, for some of y'all who are saying this right now, if your daughter or son was killed under my command, if I was the president of the United States and they went over in this war and they died, would you like it if I posted a meme about the war right on the day that they, or days after they die when you're being notified that they're dead? Would you like that? You wouldn't like that. You would think that's egregious. And I think that's really stupid that people keep giving blank checks to, regardless of whether you like the guy or not, what would be socially reprehensible actions from most everyone else alive on the planet. And it's just because this guy is the guy. And everyone acts like you have to defend him with your life because for some reason you're in jeopardy if you don't. It doesn't make any sense at all. Like, some of that stuff is just absolutely uncalled for, and that was one of them. And a lot of these things that they're doing on social media, considering that it's an official office of the United States, are highly uncouth, uncalled for, and very unprofessional. So I hope that addresses that the best I can. If you don't like that, then when you're in that position, don't bitch about it. Like when the last president had all those guys killed in Kabul, who gives a shit? Like, you know, if we're taking that perspective, who cares? I mean, whatever. You know, they died for a purpose. They died for the bigger picture. Who cares if the guy knows their names or if he doesn't, or if it was funny or if it wasn't? Who cares anymore? Like, who cares about any U.S. citizens or soldiers that die overseas? If all of it's to be trivialized to a joke, there's no point in even bringing it up. They just died, and who cares? Like, you know, and that would be a very wrong approach to take to that. It's either one way across the board in this situation, or it's not. And generally, I say that it's unacceptable to make jokes when Americans are dying. That's why we don't make jokes about the American soldiers that have died. We list their names and faces off on air, and we give them the respect that they're owed, and then we move on back to business of covering the war as seriously, at least with the Middle East, that we can. And while we'll laugh at the demise here and there of the Iranian military, and maybe crack a joke at them, we never crack a joke at U.S. forces that are involved in this whatsoever, because that's in poor taste. But with that, we're on to the next one.
We also have a 10 from Cade, and thank you very much, Cade, for that 10. He said, thanks for helping us stay informed, and there is no other source as reliable, comprehensive, and up-to-date as this channel. I've lurked for months and decided it's well overdue to send a little support.
Oh, and thank you so much for the kind words of the support. And thank you for enjoying the channel. We try our best to make sure that the news is as professional as it can be. And I got to thank you greatly for helping this channel to keep on running and making this thing possible. And so with that, a huge thanks to you so much once again. And with that, we're on to the next one.
We also have a 10 from Truck, and thank you very much, Truck, for that $10 support, and we appreciate that. Excuse me. And he said, save time and money on your next one here. I don't know what this is about right here. I don't know about saving money or saving time. I don't know about this, so it's some type of truck stuff right here. I don't know, but thank you very much for the support. And we also have a 5 from Robert Krogan, and thank you very much, Robert, as well, for the support. He said, good evening, enforcers and LSA, and great work, excuse me, by the way, on the short war, and love the time and effort, and grab one from the chat.
And thank you so much for the support and helping this channel to keep on running. And thank you so much for enjoying the work on the short war video today. I put in a decent amount of effort into that thing, and it looks like a lot of people did watch it and generally enjoyed it. And I'm very happy to hear that you're one of them. And so a big thanks to you so much for the support and helping this channel to keep on running. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And the live chat question in honor of Robert Krogan is going to go to none other than Ashen, who said, what is infantry supposed to be able to do to open the strait if the issue is drones and rockets that can be fired from just about everywhere?
That's what I've been saying. Like, they really don't serve that much of a purpose, and that's why I'm saying it can be dealt with aerial operations and then convoy escorts, because putting guys on the ground on the coast in Iran doesn't really seem to be achieving much of anything, in my opinion, rather than physically securing the coast. But these threats don't originate directly on the beaches of Iran. They're generally a little bit further inland, but close to the coast. So a big thanks to you for the support and helping this channel to keep it running, and I hope that does address that the best I can. And with that, we are on to the next one.
We also have a $10 support. It just came in from Andrew Honeycutt. And thank you very much, Andrew, as well, for that 10. He said, all I know is Oceania is winning, and I'm waiting for the gold-plated, diamond-encrusted Enforcer coin. Jokes aside, the Enforcers tackle some deep subjects critically and honestly in an LLT LSA.
And thank you so much for the support, and thank you for the kind words. I got to say that we're greatly appreciative of that, and I thank you massively for helping this channel to keep on running and making this thing possible, because if it wasn't for folks like you, we wouldn't be able to make this thing a reality. And also, I saw someone bring up a good point, but I'd have a little bit of a counter to it. I saw a real patriot say, who's been around for a while, he said, I hear what you're saying, but if you were ever in the military, you might understand how you have to keep up morale. I get what you're saying, but you have to have a sense of humor to apply to everything as a little extreme is directed towards Iran, just like your jokes, just my opinion. But here's the thing, though. Here's the difference. Like, I get what you're saying, and we've done that a lot on this channel because a lot of people, like, for example, in the war in Ukraine, that are fighting in the Ukraine war have watched this channel. And also there's a decent amount of U.S. soldiers that are watching our show right now. But the thing is that we are actually talking to them. Like, they're watching us every day while they're over there. We're not in an official government capacity, and I don't have to personally be the one who holds the burden of if one of those guys dies over there, that was by my orders. The president's in a very different position. The war was started by the president of the United States. It is being conducted under the War Powers Act, or the War Powers Resolution of 1972, meaning that he is the one completely in charge and responsible for this war. No one else in Congress is, no one else in the Supreme Court is, or anywhere else. It's just on him. And that means that while I get that keeping up morale is a good thing, that's something more so at this point for those who are actually over there. The president isn't over there on the Abraham Lincoln trying to keep the troops' spirits up by joking in the mess hall on the carrier. He's the president of the United States. He's either at Mar-a-Lago golfing or he's at the White House right now while this whole war is being fought over there. So his connection with the troops is very low. It's actually a lot lower than it even is for us with the folks that are able to watch over there. And on top of that, the other thing is that he has to balance out the fact that people have died because of his commands and his orders. And that means that you kind of got to play the military, the martial side and the civil side simultaneously. Like, you don't want to sound absolutely downtrodden and pitiful about the whole thing. I can agree with that. But at the same time, you don't want to go to the point of just turning the whole thing into a joke or acting like it's a complete tragedy. You have to balance it, because those families that are being told their son has died overseas have been told their son has died overseas because of the orders of the president. Because if it wasn't for the start of the war, these people wouldn't be dead. But on the other hand, we have to keep up the morale of the troops. So it's better to try and be more middle of the road and not go too far into the comedy or too far into the macabre and acting grave about the whole situation as the president. And that's why I'm saying that generally these sorts of actions and statements on social media are highly uncouth. But with that, we're on to the next one.
We also have a 5 from Bob Dobbs, and thank you, Bob, for that 5. He said, what was the present that Iran gave us, and was this all a lie that we got right here? So we never heard about what the present was. Like, we still don't know what that was. It hasn't been announced. And also, Iran has come out and pretty much gone berserk on the United States ever since then. They've started making wild statements. They've started fortifying Kharg Island. So I'm not sure if this supposed present or gift even exists. But Enforcer, what say you?
I would say I don't think the gift exists, to be entirely honest. We still haven't seen it today. They haven't even announced what it was. It was just a positive statement that had no backing to it at this point. But a big thanks to you for support and helping this channel to keep it running. And with that, we're on to the next one.
We also have a 5 from Hysterics, who said, hey guys, a frequent viewer here and watching this live from the emergency room. Oh, my goodness. Sorry to hear that, by the way. I hope you're okay, or at least under the circumstances. He said, please keep me in your prayers and LSA.
And we will, and I got to say, I hope you're doing well over there. And I thank you so much for watching, even while you're in the emergency room. I got to thank you massively for the support and helping this channel to keep on running. And with that, we're on to the next one.
We also have a 5 from Hoodoo, Texas, who said, in your short war video, you show a Ukrainian drone plane at 6:55 with what I believed is a Fab 100 bomb, not a Fab 250.
And let me check that. See here, let me go back up to that. Let me see here. Fab 250. It's actually a couple of different designs. But if we were to use this one here, it's a pretty close match. This one's actually Turkish made, but it's a fairly close match to the one that we're seeing right there. Not identical, however, but it's kind of close. Or that one right here, which also appears to be similar, just without the paint. But let's go look at a Fab 100. No, sadly, I don't think it's a Fab 100. I think it is a Fab 250. So I can't really see. Well, actually, hang on. That one has the general. I mean, it could be. I don't know the dimensions of the Fab 100 compared to the 250. It generally looks like a 250 me, and in the past, we had heard the Ukrainians did say that they were 250s. It might be a Fab 100, though. You might actually be right. I'll have to look into that a little bit more and see if I can get a better answer to that. But a big thanks to you for support and also pointing that out. I'll have to look into that. And with that, we are on to the next one.
We also have a fly from Oblivion. He said, address misinformation being sowed concerning the USD being superseded by the yuan in this context of the Hormuz and the war you just mentioned. And also, number 2, 5-day deadline, question mark.
And as far as the currency goes, there's a lot of people who, for years, literally the whole time we've been running the show for 4 years, there's a whole crowd of people here in America who are just hedging on and praying for the fall of the US dollar as the reserve currency of the world, which is not happening even right now or anytime soon. Passage through the Strait of Hormuz has to be paid to the Iranians in Chinese yuan at the value of 2 million US dollars. But that does not mean that is now the reserve currency of all oil trades in the area. That's just the currency you have to use to bribe the Iranians to go through the strait, even if they allow you to. But that does not mean that our reserve currency is being replaced as the main trading currency within the Middle East or anywhere else. And as far as the 5-day deadline, I don't really know about that one. We'll have to see if they back off of that again. But I do thank you for the support and help with this channel to keep on running. And with that, we're on to the next one.
We also have a 5 from Live Animal, who said, I think that the U.S. flag video that was posted is meant to convey that the U.S. flag is the last thing the IRGC will see before, going out. If that's what they meant by it, there's a much more professional way to like go about stuff like that. It's just highly unprofessional. Like it's childish, and it's like even if it is the enemy, it's like this involves it's war, and obviously death is a part of it. So it's like I get the fact that we're trying to keep the morale of the troops high, but at the same time though, it's like the White House shouldn't start engaging in like these what do they call it, like hype fest or something like that for a war. It's like it starts going overboard. Like this needs to be dealt with professionally. People are going to call me a stickler for that, but I think there ought to be some professionalism if that was intentional. But Enforcer, what say you?
I definitely agree with that. And so I hope that does address that the best I can. And a big thanks to you for support. And with that, we're on to the next one.
We also have a 5 from Live Animal once again. They said the U.S. flag video is pure childish intimidation. And that's exactly what I was just saying just then, actually, as well. It really is. It's childish behavior, to say the least, in the midst of a very serious war that's actually, hurting everybody right now because the Strait of Hormuz is closed. But Enforcer, what say you?
I would definitely agree. And also on top of that, it's like, what Iranian official is going to get on Twitter and then go, oh, I'm shivering me timbers. A little U.S. flag popped up for one frame. It's like, that's just stupid. I mean, it's like they're not going to do that. And that's not really going to have that much of an impact on them, really. But I do hope that does address it well. And speaking, since everyone keeps on bringing up that American flag, I do have to tell y'all that I did get an American flag today, and I thought it was a pretty cool one. I want to show it to y'all really quickly. I actually got a U.S. sesquicentennial edition of the flag, which is made by the sesquicentennial, I think it's the commission, which was set up by the U.S. like 20-something years ago to get ready for the sesquicentennial, which is the 250th anniversary of the country. I actually got one of these flags today. It's made out of cotton and nylon, I think, and it's actually really nice looking. I thought it had like a really nice style to it, and the 250 was really clean, and I like that it incorporated the quote-unquote Betsy Ross 13-star flag and the 13 stripes with a nice 250 on it. I thought it was really clean looking, so I had to get one.
Very nice.
It is quite nice indeed, I'd have to say. But with that, it is time for us to move on to the next one.
We also have a 5 from Live Animal yet again. They actually have 3 more, by the way. They said, when any government official starts tweeting out nonsensical videos, it's a big sign that they're truly rattled, and they're very wary of any escalation, in their words.
Yeah, I would have to say that probably is true. And a big thanks to you for support, and I hope that does address that well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And we also have a 5 from Live Animal yet again, who said, one thing is clear, the Arab nations are unable to defend themselves, and Iran has created a big reputation for itself and will eventually triumph. Sad. I don't think so on that one right there. I don't think so. Like, Iran's definitely not going to triumph. And also, Iran's reputation is built on terrorism. So I wouldn't say that's a good reputation to have whatsoever. That was the reason why I said we ought to go and deal with Iran, is because they have that reputation for terror, and they can't triumph under those circumstances. But Enforcer, what say you?
I would generally agree with Enforcer Matt on that. I don't think the Iranians will be able to win, but it's definitely going to be a bit of a slalom, to put it that way, until we end up coming out on top. But a big thanks to you for support, and we are on to the next one.
And we also have a 10 that just came in from Distract Them. And thank you very much for that support. They said, do you guys think that drone warfare is going to have to be banned like chemical warfare? And I can't figure out a practical solution.
I don't think so. I think the drone warfare is going to be around to stay because we haven't seen anybody calling for drone warfare to be declared inhumane. And to be entirely honest, it really isn't inhumane. It's really like any other normal weapon system, a conventional one. It's like a normal guided munition, and guided munitions have never been questioned under the Geneva Convention of possibly being unlawful for use. And so I would say that drone warfare is probably going to be around to stay, and modern tactics and doctrine and general strategy is going to have to revolve around the usage of them and defense against them. So big thanks to you for support and helping this channel to keep on running. And with that, we are on to the next one.
We also have another 5 from Live Animal who said, what was the present that the president was talking about that the RGC gave the other day?
We don't even know. We don't even think it's real, actually. We think that was just a BS statement. You know, and people will get angry over that because saying that the president could, you know, just deceive people about something is always offensive to some people. But, I mean, we haven't seen it. He hasn't announced what it is. It's a whole day later, and it's basically like that whole thing was never even said at this point. It's kind of like how, you know, there was this claim that, you know, income tax was going to disappear to the tariffs, and then we had income tax and tariffs, and the income taxes didn't disappear. Kind of similar thing to that. But anyways, with that, I hope that has addressed that the best I can. A big thanks to you for support and helping this channel to keep it running. And with that, we're on to the next one.
We also have a 5 from Filter Trade, and thank you very much for that support as well. He said, if you freeze the flag video during the static, it appears to be a Morse code message, and can we check it out?
Sadly, I don't think so because I actually don't know Morse that well. So sadly, I wouldn't really be able to decipher that all too well. It'll probably take one of our Morse code decoders looking at that off air and then possibly giving us an answer. But a huge thanks to you for support. I hope that does address that well. And with that, we're on to the next one.
We also have a 5 from Data Relay, who did not leave a comment, but thank you very much, Mr. Data, for that $5 support. We do appreciate it very much. We also have a 5 from the B93, who said, why are some people trying to lower the U.S. standards to the point we fight like a follower of Putin? And I don't understand why, I'll be honest with you. Like, I've heard statements recently, we won't name names, but I've heard people try to dismiss the rules of engagement, which is insanity. I've heard people basically explain away war crimes to a large degree and make it sound like somehow war crimes are acceptable under XYZ circumstances, which is wild to hear that coming out of our country. It's disappointing to hear that coming out of our country, because the whole reason we're fighting the fight is because we're trying to get rid of these sick, evil forces like the Iranian government, and also trying to deal with the Putin government, which is sick beyond belief. We're trying to deal with that so that way they're no longer threats to the United States. But in the meantime, though, at least currently, we're kind of becoming the thing that we're trying to fight against, which is the completely opposite of what I would want to happen. But Enforcer, what say you?
I'll tell you the general reason why, and here's a couple of my opinions. There is this huge push today, and this is the best way that I can explain it, because this is generally how I always see it happening. There's like this marriage of a concept between, I don't even know how to describe it, but I just got to be honest with y'all and describe it unfiltered. There's like this marriage of concepts between Christianity and like Norse Viking ideologies, like, you know, like their mythology and stuff like that. And so there's like this concept in a lot of people's minds that you can claim to be righteous and pious, but also be a barbarian simultaneously, and that's totally fine, which I don't really understand, because I mean, I'll be completely frank with y'all. I've never really looked at the Vikings as like honorable group or a group worth emulating. Like, to me, they're basically the era's equivalent of Somali pirates, and I don't really see a lot of people going around America talking about, look at me, I'm the captain now, and I don't really know why hell a lot of people want to act like we're Vikings these days or barbarians, because it doesn't make any sense. Like, if you look at any other prior war in this nation's history, we always tried to keep up with the concept of we are going to be a nation of morals and values, and while that is not prescribed to a particular religion in this country, we are still going to follow those values because that's what makes us American, and that's what makes us a step above the rest, is that we actually have morals and we adhere to them. And nowadays the idea is that we don't have any morals and we're basically just a whole bunch of barbarians, and I don't really understand the concept of that, because it completely removes the idea that America is a city upon a hill, which has been a really big concept throughout all of American history, is that we are supposed to be this shining example in every way, especially in our moral values, because if it isn't for our laws and our moral values, a lot of Americans lose their identity overnight. That's really what American values are hitched to, is our concept of due process, our concept of following the Constitution and having democratic ideals and generally being benevolent, especially when it comes to how we do things. Even in fighting war, it's never anything personal, it's just business. That's how America's always done it. But nowadays we basically say throw all that out the window and just do whatever you want. And it's
And also, if something goes wrong, like, the U.S. makes a mistake and accidentally hits the wrong target or something like that, to take responsibility for it and simply try to fix it, it's like that would probably be good right there. And also, if something bad is done, it's like certainly don't brag about it. Like, don't do that. It's like we should never be at the point where the country is bragging about, how we were able to, oh, we really got them good, we really blah blah blah. It's like it's a war. It's like we understand that there is death involved in it, or otherwise it wouldn't be a war. But it's like we shouldn't glorify it to the point where it's like something that we're praising. It's like it's a necessary evil. War is evil. Even if you're fighting for the right side, war is an evil thing. It's not good. It's something that's necessary, though, in some circumstances. It's never something to be celebrated by any means.
No, it's not really. Sometimes it's a necessary action, but it's not something that we're not supposed to be basically having a death cult where we applaud death no matter what, even if it's completely unnecessary. We want to go in and we want to, generally as the United States, only kill when we have to kill, and everyone else is spared. That's how we've generally conducted our wars throughout all of history. And I know someone's about to say, but what about Miley, and what about Biscari? Yeah, and look at that. They're not looked at as applauded elements. Like, you don't hear people going, yeah, those guys landed on those choppers and they wiped out those Vietnamese villages, and that was great. Everyone looks at that as a dark point in American military history. We go, what type of insanity was that? When we look at the Biscari massacre in Italy, we go, what type of nut jobs were those? Like, who the hell ever thought that was a great idea? What kind of a sick, depraved individual would execute unarmed prisoners of war, and 80 of them at one time? That was as bad as the SS did to us in the Malmedy massacre up in the Battle of the Bulge. And then on top of that, with My Lai, no one ever sits there and goes, oh, well, that was a great thing. Everyone goes, that was crazy. They were going around shooting innocent women and children in those villages. There's no way to ever say that was just fine and it's just war and whatever. I mean, people have been in outrage for that over decades, and rightfully so. Like, those soldiers are representatives of this country. And whether people say it's war or not, well, we hold our soldiers to a high standard of training. This isn't the Syrian army. This isn't the Russian army. This is the United States Army. And we're not going to have a whole bunch of wild, ne'er-do-well raiders, bandits, marauders, and barbarians as a part of the American army. They're going to go over there and they're going to conduct a war properly and professionally, and only the people who fight in arms against us will end up being killed or end up being captured. But everyone else who's an innocent, unarmed civilian, they will be able to pass right by, and they ought to have a good impression of the United States, and they ought to think that the U.S. Army is probably the most civilized and most refined army that they've ever seen. It will make them a fan of the United States, and not only that, it will give them a great bit of reverence and respect to those soldiers who represent this republic. But that's why I say that we should never just turn a blind eye to that, because they represent our nation, and my nation will never be represented poorly, whether it's at arms or across the seas or here on the home front. But with that, we're on to the next one.
We also have a 5 from Steve, who said, send in the orb. And honestly, I think the orb's already there. It could already be there as we speak. But thank you very much, Steve, for that support. We also have a 5 from Hysterics once again. He said, hey, guys, I made it out of the ER. Oh, I'm also, by the way, you made it out of there fast, by the way. You made it out of there while we were literally still in the air. He said, thanks for the prayers, and LSA forever.
And thank you so much for support and helping this channel to keep on running. And thank you so much for the kind words. And also great to hear that you got out of the ER fast. That was a good thing to hear. And so big thanks to you so much once again. I hope that does dress that well. And with that, we're on to the next one.
We also have a 5 from Jeremy Vahill. He said, why do I need to really think deep to understand this whole situation?
It's a very complicated one.
He said something else, by the way, but I had to abridge it because it was, I can't repeat it.
Oh, well, I mean, it's a pretty complicated situation. You usually have to think pretty deeply on this one. We do too. But a big thanks to you for supporting. With that, we're on to the next one.
We also have a 5 from Star. He said, I can't believe that after the U.S. bombed the piss out of Iran, they're not willing to agree to a peace agreement. Who'd have thunk? Well, I mean, sometimes that does work, though. Like, you can generally bombard the enemy into submission as long as you're working with a country that isn't basically a death cult. I mean, Iran qualifies as basically, the government at least, qualifies as a death cult. They're terrorists to the core of the government inside of Iran. So to expect a group like that to simply, take some losses and then realize, oh, like this isn't going well. It's for Iran in their heads, they're like getting martyred. So it's not too bad of a thing for them. Is in their minds, that's like the ultimate victory in their heads is to get martyred. So when you're dealing with a force like that, this whole submission thing doesn't really work. But Enforcer, what say you?
I'd have to say that I would agree with Enforcer Matt. It doesn't really necessarily work on them, especially when they have a concept of martyrdom, which actually appears to be a very strongly subscribed to belief within the Islamic regime's government, so they're not really that scared of death. We'll eventually find one, though, that is scared of death, but for now, they're not here. But I would generally have to agree with Enforcer Matt on that. I also saw someone say, if we didn't show mercy or quarter, that would be scary. It's actually not that scary. It's actually more emboldening to our enemy than one would think. Because think about this. The Russians have hardly shown any quarter to any Ukrainians. The ones that they capture, they torture to the point that those guys wish they died. And we know that from when they return. And any Ukrainian prisoners that they catch on the front, a decent amount of time, they're executed whether they can provide for them or not. And that hasn't done anything to make the Ukrainians terrified and go, oh, maybe we ought to just roll over to the Russians. It's made them fight because they know that death is a certainty. If they surrender to the Russians, they're going to be tortured to the point that they wish they were dead, and death would have been a better fate, or they're going to be killed on the spot. And that makes the Ukrainians fight like their life is on the line, because it truly is. There's literally no way to escape. Once you start fighting the Russians, it's a fight to the death. You're going to die whether you surrender or get killed by their hand. And in World War II against the Japanese, basically no U.S. Marines or the U.S. Army would ever surrender to the Japanese, because they knew that death was almost a certainty at that point, because of the concept that the Japanese had that surrender was dishonor. They'd largely execute most people on the spot, and if you ever did make it to a prisoner of war camp, once again, much like the Russians, death was a preferable alternative at that point. And so the Marines would fight to the death in the Pacific, and the Japanese would also fight as well, and it just made the war that much more brutal. Compared to the Western Front with the Germans, where we made it clear, we would provide the Germans with actual I guess you could say quarter if they were to surrender, and the Germans would also provide our guys generally with quarter if they surrendered. That made that war a lot, to be truthful, although the war in Europe certainly wasn't as civilized by modern standards, it was far more civilized than the war that we saw in the Pacific that the Marines were fighting. And that's why we want to do that, because we don't want to see that everyone has to get in a pitched fight to the death when that may not even be necessary. But with that, I hope that does address it the best I can. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And up next, a big shout out to Celtic Nations for putting in a 5. And we do appreciate that support. We also have a 2 from Mr. Jones. And thank you very much, Mr. Jones, for that 2. And also a big shout out to Jake for that 2 as well. And we also have a 5 from Jason. And he put in a quote here. Let's see here. Blah, 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 blah. So, me personally, I don't necessarily agree with the quote. I'll read part of it. He said, while just the art of being kind is all the sad world needs, Ella Wheeler Wilcox.
And I thank you for the support. Sadly, I think I might be missing some of the context because the whole thing isn't read, but I do thank you for the support. And with that, we are on to the next one.
If you'd like to read it, you could, if you'd like to.
I don't have the spreadsheet up at the moment, so I can't get to it easy. So with that, we are on to the next one.
And this one goes to Seti Church, who puts in a 2. He said that this is an at-will war until Iran surrenders.
Generally, that is true. And also, by the way, folks, while it is a war of national necessity, we do have to remember that technically we are the aggressing party in the conflict because we had to strike them first. So that is true. We are the aggressing party in the conflict currently, whether it was necessary or not. So big thanks to you for the support and help with this channel to keep it running. I hope that does address that well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
We also have a 2 from Dago, who said, do Iranian drones use GLONASS? Now, how it hit moving targets?
I generally wouldn't know, unfortunately. I'd have to declare ignorance on that one. But a big thanks to you for support, and we are on to the next one.
And with that, folks, we are now fresh out of Super Chat questions. And a huge shout out to everybody once again for helping us to keep the channel running through that support. And we do appreciate that. It's now time to get some live chat questions and see what the other folks in the live chat were saying about the questions tonight, the quora. But first of all, we have the Morse code decoders. Tonight we had Paul, Kevin, Mason, Joni, Norm, Arabelle, Heroy Fluffness, Kush, Kovateric, Sire, Brian, and Encrypted Clippy. And they said, Morse code says, oh man, they didn't accept our peace talks? Who would have expected that? And LT, LSA.
And That's a sound of money. Y'all got that dead on the nail, and that was the Morse code message of the night. I can congratulate y'all greatly on getting that correct time and time again, because y'all are always getting that dead on the nail, and it's always an impressive and incredible thing. And so with that, it is time for us to move on into our live chats, and we are going to be answering live chats until we reach let's see, that would be 1:30 a.m. Eastern time. So that will be for the next 5 minutes, and we can get a lot of them in 5 minutes. And so with that, we are on to the first live chat question of the night.
And this one goes to Army Doc, who said, do you think the MEU will go to Yemen to fight and eliminate the Houthis?
I don't think so. I think that they're still directing all of their attention and energies towards Iran at the moment. So a big thanks to you for a great question, and we're on to the next one.
And this one goes to the Bearded, who said, me thinks that someone gave Ukraine some new toys to play with those attacks. And what say you?
Maybe. I'm thinking that they either made something new or they got something new, because I'm just not buying the fact that those were A-22s. They seem to be very different to me than what we've seen before from A-22s. But I hope that addresses that well, and we're on to the next one.
And we also have one from Kendrick, who said, didn't France send its carriers to keep the Red Sea open?
France actually sent a carrier off of the coast of Cyprus, and we believe it's there to provide air cover to some of its allied nations that it's diplomatically aligned with in the Middle East, but it doesn't appear to be conducting any actions to help keep the Bab El Mendab or something like that open. So I hope that does address that the best I can, and with that, we are on to the next one.
We also have a live chat from AF Kaplan, who said, now that Iran is deploying to Kharg Island, how will the U.S. respond? And concentration on freeing the Strait of Hormuz, the nuclear sites, perhaps? And what do you think?
I think that the Strait of Hormuz should be the priority, but I can't, unfortunately, because this current administration doesn't have any concept of war planning or how to do it, I can't actually tell you what they're going to do, because they generally seem to just... They're almost like a dead frog that's getting zapped by electrodes, and just like an arm or a leg just jerks randomly. That's kind of what the war planning looks like right now. So sadly, I can't tell you what they would do with any certainty, but I could tell you that if I was the president, I would be focusing entirely on Hormuz and reopening that. So I hope that does address that the best I can, and with that, we are on to the next one.
We also have one from Alpha Warrior, who said, how will Estonia respond to the Russian incident with the power plant, and will NATO respond to it, and is it potential Russian aggression?
At best, the Estonians are going to invoke Article 4, and it will go to a conference in Brussels, and then it'll end there probably. That's probably all that'll happen at this point, in my honest opinion, and that's in the best case scenario. At worst, no one's going to do anything about it, and no one's even going to respond to it, and that's a pretty decent likelihood at this point. So I hope that does address it the best I can. And with that, we are on to the third to last question of the night.
And this one goes to Dish, who said, do you guys really think that they're going to go to Kharg, or do you think they're going to retake the strait? Now, it's hard to say with that one right there, because Kharg Island, I will say I've heard the president speak about Kharg Island in the past, like before he was currently in office, and he seemed to always generally know that Kharg Island was very important to Iran, and he always talked about it. So I think there might be a personal fixation with Kharg Island, so it's very possible. I will say that Kharg Island is the crown jewel. Like if the U.S. could take and hold that without many casualties, that would be a very large strategic victory for the U.S. Like it would be a miracle if we didn't take casualties. I would be impressed, and also I'd have to eat my foot. But at the same time, though, I don't think they can take it and not sustain massive casualties from trying to hold the island. While they're trying to fortify positions, they're going to be vulnerable to drone attacks. So I have a feeling they're going for Kharg, but it could be something else. But it's definitely going to be boots on the ground in some form or another. But Enforcer, what say you?
I generally agree with Enforcer Matt on that. And so with that, we're on to the second to last question of the night.
We also have one from One Visual, who said, do you think the USA going to war with Iran has gave them actually more power in the world because of the strait being closed?
Generally, yes, because before this, they had never exercised direct control over the strait, and now they are, the entirety of it for that matter, which has given them a lot more leverage than they've ever had in reality, because up until now, they never proved that they could actually blockade the whole strait and enforce that for a sustained duration, and now they have. So it is giving them a lot more leverage globally at this point because of this now realized fact or reality that we're in due to that blockade. So I hope that does address that the best I can, and with that in mind, folks, it's time for us to get to the final question of the night. And so, who is like last person who threw in the lucky last question of the night?
And this one goes to Ashen, who said, what is infantry supposed to be able to do to open the strait if the issue is drones and rockets that can be fired from just about pretty much anywhere?
We actually answered that question prior, I believe, as a super chat. So let's try and grab another one really quickly.
There is no other ones.
Oh, well, to answer this one then, that's what I'm saying. Like, that's what I'm saying, that putting troops on the shore wouldn't be a great idea. I would say that conducted and sustained air operations would probably be the best result. So with that, I hope that does address that the best I can. And with that, folks, it's time for us to move on and into the end of the stream. I gotta say, we are massively appreciative and greatly thankful for all of y'all watching. It's been an absolute honor and a pleasure to be able to run this stream for the past 3.5 hours for all of y'all. We had a peak viewership tonight of 25.8 thousand people, and 193,000 people have been here before the stream ended. We have to thank you all massively for enjoying this channel and considering it to be your primary source of news, and we will see you all tomorrow at 10 p.m. Eastern Time to cover the next 24 hours of the news from around the world. And if there is a short war video to be made, Enforcer Matt will be the one making that short war video tomorrow. Hey! And so with that, good night, good luck, take care, stay safe. Slava Ukraini, Slava, long live the East Spring Army, and long live the Republic.
And with that, folks, we will see you all tomorrow on the next Nightly War News stream at 10 p.m. Eastern. And be sure to join us for that, by the way, because I'm sure we'll have more big news to cover tomorrow on the stream. And also, if there is news midday, I will be putting out a short war video to cover that as well. So keep an eye out for that. And of course, if you have the notifications and the bell turned on, you should get a ding, ding, ding on the phone right there to let you know that it's come out. And also, by the way, a big shout out to Mr. Man for putting in a 3 and said cheers. And cheers to you, good friend. And thank you very much for the support. And we will see you all tomorrow, of course. And thank you all once again for joining us, almost 200,000 plus people that were here tonight. And of course, Slava Ukraine, Heroam Slava, get some rest, and good night.
Spring on me shore.